It's very difficult to compare 2020's conservatism to 1880s conservatism.
It's very much not.
You start out in 1954 by saying no. By 1968, you can't say hurts you, backfire, so you say stuff like force busing, states' rights, and all that stuff.
But yeah, I don't know if I can call it the main event. Main events go on last. It's really more like the big one for today. But Jubilee, in their infinite wisdom, put out another, what I can only hope is a banger, black conservatives versus white liberals. This one starring, which caught my eye more than anything, Twitch's own, or I should say, liberalism's own destiny. So it's just this is a longer video. I got time. We're gonna watch all of it.
This is the 112th episode of Middle Ground, and we want you to help us decide what the next 112 episodes will be. Join us.
Following prompt. White Americans have way more advantages than black Americans.
I think I'm a
White Americans have more okay. I can't wait to hear that. Okay.
It would seem so.
Do white Americans have more advantages because they're white, or do just white Americans have advantages because of historic factors? I think that people want to argue at the end of the day over.
wait. You guys can't see it. Hold up. Oh. I love Destiny, white liberal. That is correct. That is incredibly correct. He is the white liberal. But no, this actually is a base take, though. I got that's just funny.
Whether it's because you're white or not, I think that the answer is because you're white in the past, and that's how it kind of carries over to today. You know, even in times of the United States history where black people tried to build wealth, you know, with the Tulsa riots and everything, where that this wealth has been destroyed. And something that's upsetting to me is when conservatives talk about how we can't blame the past for what's happening in the present. That is true to some extent, but then the next breath they'll talk about how important it is to have dual-parent households, how important it is to have a strong family, to have responsibility passed on from parent to child. And we've seen in the past that because of racial issues, that process has been severely disrupted.
The funny thing is that agreeing with all these
Wait
things
a minute.
is when
I recognize this kid's voice. I know who this. I've seen him on one of these other ones before.
I did my research when I was younger, which arrived me to my standpoint of being a conservative, because I believed it was racist, Democrat, liberal ideologies and policies dating.
Racist, Democrat, liberal. This is why I can't take specifically black conservatives, but just conservatives in general. I just can't take them seriously when it's always this like, I need to tie a bow around every identifiable like label of the Democratic Party. So it can't just be Democrats, which is a party, by the way, that is different from liberalism. Understand, liberalism is an ideology. Democrat is a party in the United States. What was the other one he said? Liberal, Democrat. What the fuck? What other one did he say? What was the third one?
Agreeing with all these things is when I did my research when I was younger, which arrived me to my standpoint of being a conservative, because I believed it was racist, Democrat, liberal ideologies and policies.
No, you just used liberal and Democrat. Okay, cool. Yeah, so keep in mind, Democrats were not liberals until a shift happened throughout the 1950s and through the 1960s. Keep in mind, like, Democrats, in so much as their party affiliation, or I should say in so much as their ideological alignment, was not liberal, really. Because you have to remember, parties shift their ideologies. We are seeing right now a shift in the Republican Party from neoconservative right-wing to, and I think a lot of that shift has already happened, but we are still kind of always moving to a degree. But that is now moved from the Republican Party, from neoconservative, from a neoliberal conservative worldview, to a much farther right-wing authoritarian one. That's kind of the shift that we've seen over the last, I'd say, I don't know, I'd say 30 years or so, anywhere between 30 to 40 years, up until about Reagan is when I would say that shift began. And I don't know if like that's one of those cases where I don't know if there's ever like there isn't a hard point where you really cross. It's just kind of gradually it happens. And the same thing happened in the Democratic Party. For a long time, the Democrats were the conservative party until most people point to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which was kind of the breaking point, if you will, in terms of conservative support within the Democratic Party. You saw, it's the, you'd hear a lot about in the past about Southern Democrats, which eventually shifted into the Republican Party during the Nixon administration. So, this whole like Democrat liberal thing that they have to always tie it to is always this game of like, oh, we need to say Democrat because that's historically they were the more racist party. The Ku Klux Klan, as an example, was born out of and gained support within, or I should say, the Democratic Party of the South, and in the past did have support from the Ku Klux Klan and did have a lot of Southern members who were, one would say Confederate sympathizers. That is one thing, but that was also before the ideology swapped. Republicans will say, oh, we're still the, we're the party of Lincoln, but Lincoln was not a conservative. Lincoln, if running for office today, would be in the Democratic Party. Same with, so it's just keep in mind, that's when they say Democrat and then they say liberal, because those two things are distinct and they're trying to make a historical argument, and also, but they have to separate the ideology because they need to be able to argue that no, it's liberalism. So, even if you say Democrats, oh, well, Democrats were conservative back then. Well, it's the liberalism that's the problem. Even the liberalism is what gives us democracy and a lot of other things that we appreciate here in the United States. Anyway, continue.
Dating all the way back to the 1800s, all the way up to the 1960s. The purported big switch, but I think it was more so when Democrats decided to be a bit more cloak and dagger about their true.
Oh yeah, and it's always like, oh, it's not that they're not racist; it's that they're.
we want to help you by doing
not
these things and seeing them as
doing
inferior.
what things?
Affirmative action, welfare, all sorts of things that eventually ruin our culture in places where we.
Keep in mind affirmative action. If you ever heard somebody bitch about affirmative action, most of the time it's because they feel like it's unfair to them, and they don't like. Did you ever notice that the argument against affirmative action is always speaking for black people, and always one where we go, should we tell black people that they need to have like the scales tipped in their favor instead of what affirmative action actually is doing, which is rebalancing the scales to begin with? Because keep in mind, for a long time in this country, and there are people whose grandparents lived during this time, we're not equal to white people. Black people were not equal to white people, especially in the South, for a long time in this country. And to this day, we see the effects of that. We see the effects of a lack of generational wealth being passed down. We see a lack of opportunities in neighborhoods. There's a reason why if you go to any hood in the United States, you'll notice that there's a lot less businesses and there's a lot worse infrastructure. There's reasons for that. Because of the divestment from banks and other moneyed institutions in those neighborhoods, they drive them into poverty. And, what breeds poverty but illegal markets? People at the end of the day have to pay their rent, have to pay their mortgage, and it's why you see a lot of drug dealing going on. Keep in mind also, we have the drug war that locks up a lot of people for not just possession, but for petty, I should say locks up people for possession, but also keeps the market in that illegal, any kind of black market or any kind of, illegal market, keeps all of that stuff in the illegal market, which means we don't get taxes for it, which means that there aren't actual regulations. You can't go to the police when somebody threatens you. because they didn't like the weed you sold them, whatever. Like there just isn't a way to adjudicate those issues. So people end up adjudicating them at the barrel of a gun most of the time. So like there's just a lot of problems, and like affirmative action being one of these. Like, oh well, do we need should we tell black people that they need help to get jobs or this or that or whatever? No, this has nothing to do with the psychological standing of black people in this country. This has to do with the rebalancing that needs to get done with black people in this country in terms of their wealth attainment and success attainment. It's just, and you're not going to solve that through I think, colorblind approach, because the colorblind approach isn't one that's ever going to target the like specifically African Americans, who again were property, and raise them up in a manner that is sufficient. If black folks are down here and white folks are up here, let's say, in terms of the like social hierarchy in 1922, right? And if you say, okay, we're going to go with a colorblind approach and make sure that, we're not favoring any group others, you know what's going to happen? This. Everyone's going to rise. But no, at no point will we ever meet parity. Will we ever get to this? You don't get to this unless you raise this hand, which means by definition, we have to, in some forms, tip the scales in African Americans' favor. We have to directly account for the history of this country before we can't, black people will not be equal just because we start, being fair in 2023. They still have hundreds of years of systemic oppression and a systemic poverty bearing down on them. That's why a lot of people argue for reparations. It's just a quick, easy, you're done. But unfortunately, there is, I think, a lot of hesitation towards reparations because people go, well, white people or non-black people are going to feel like they're not getting anything out of it. Even though the answer to that is, yeah, they're not. Because they weren't property at one point. Sorry. I don't know what to tell you on that one. And again, the United States has done this before. We did reparations for internment camps. But for whatever reason, there's this aversion for it for black people. And obviously, reparations for black people, a lot more complicated. Bookkeeping wasn't, back then wasn't what it is today. But still, there's just, at the end of the day, it's always just like, people talk about affirmative action as if it's this like unfair thing. And it's like, well, yeah, it's kind of supposed to. It's rewriting the unfairness of the society before. Like,
we are now.
So
but I want to get back to the history of it because we're talking about.
Well, I just want to make sure we're clear. Giving them money hurt them, right? Is that what you're saying?
Well, yes, giving them, because if your father's out of the home, that's when we give you the money. If you're living in
Yeah,
this
so
housing,
then give them the money while the dad's in
rent free.
Well, then give them the money while the dad's in the home.
If you're working
So
this
give
amount of
them the-
hours and getting less than this amount of
You're
dollars,
throwing-
you're getting money
you're
from the
throwing
government.
the
Yes,
baby-
it is incentivizing.
you're throwing the baby out with the
it is-
bathwater.
I don't even know what that means in this scenario because yes.
Go.
You're
Okay, you want
throwing
to talk about throwing babies
Okay,
out with
let
the
me break this
bathwater?
down for
Margaret
you.
Sanger wanted to exterminate the black race because she thought they were weeds. So yeah, we can literally talk about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. That's what
Okay.
Margaret Sanger, that's what Democrat policies wanted to do to my people. So that's why I feel so strongly about it, because it is these policies that date back centuries that were built.
I've heard this quote before. I've heard Margaret Sanger's quote before. I haven't looked into it, but it always kind of just feels like coping bullshit.
Off of the death and poverty of my people.
Let's take a breath.
Sure. I'm breathing.
Okay.
So a lot of babies aren't, but
All
I
right.
am,
Okay.
sadly.
I don't know what that means. When I say throw the baby out with the bathwater, you want to
Well, depending on when you define baby, they don't breathe for like, 9 months? People who call fetuses babies, they're not breathing for like 9 months.
completely get rid of welfare, okay? Or at least I don't want to put that on you haven't said that, but the conservative apparatus does. clearly. So giving money to a group of people does not hurt them.
I mean,
It
sure, if
can't.
you're talking about a lottery,
It
just, hey,
literally
take
can't.
money. But
Yes.
there are strings
Take money.
attached.
I mean, keep in mind, what's it called? The COVID payments kept probably millions out of poverty during the pandemic. Like, giving people money is not like, you probably pay bills. Do you think you're gonna be hurt by someone giving you $1,000? Are you gonna be like, shit, fuck, I have $1,000. Fuck, what do I do? No, all my finances are falling apart. I wasn't accounting for this extra $1,000. Like, no, you'll be that $1,000 is gonna go to pay down debt or pay for food so you don't starve or something. It's also why giving money to the poor is a lot more efficient than to the rich. If you're rich and someone gives you $1,000, you're just gonna throw it in a savings account and let it accrue interest. But if you're poor, you're gonna go spend it. It's called the I believe it's called the velocity of money, if I remember correctly.
Attached to that money.
Take all the
there
money.
are strings attached
Give
to
them
that money.
millions. Make them all millionaires. I don't care. Giving money to black people does not hurt them.
And that has
thinking
not
that-
happened, though. That has not happened.
What do you mean?
That has not happened.
No.
It hasn't been a
You're saying
reparations. It hasn't been this
so
or that.
what
It has
you're
been a
saying
welfare program,
welfare
Great
was
Societies
designed.
Act that
Welfare
was built
was-
off of the idea of, hey, we get these families split up, we get these
So
people
then let
living
them
here.
keep the family together and keep all the money.
I mean,
There you go.
I guess
Boom,
so,
done.
but I guarantee you,
I guess
there's
so.
no way that
Why
would
would you
happen.
not advocate for that?
So what he's complaining about, what's funny is what he's complaining about is means testing. But keep in mind, the Republican Party and more conservative Democrats are the ones who argue for means tests, not more not like more liberal Democrats, and certainly not progressives. Like, what he's complaining about is means testing. But again, the groups of people who want to implement means tests aren't like Republicans. Don't want means tests. They want worse. They don't want anything. They won't give you any assistance. Democrats, unfortunately, will means test it. Progressives will just, we have no interest in means testing it. If anything, you don't really want that many means tests. You want like a few, but like not to the extent that we usually have. If anything, you want to open up more of those funds to more people.
So in your, I guess, research of like history of this country and everything,
Jacob.
do you find like the Reconstruction era and like the failures of like what it wanted to be and then what it ended up being, and then which led into, had downstream effects to enter into the Jim Crow era, and you have policies like redlining that influence how schools are funded. The downstream effects of slavery, do you think put black people as generally in a worse off position than white Americans?
I think generation by generation, the effects of slavery have been diluted, but generation by generation, the
Diluted? What does that mean? Does he mean that like as generations come up, you're farther and farther from the conditions of slavery? I would agree with that, but I also wouldn't argue that you're closer, or at the very least that you're, again, because we're not talking about, oh, we've come so far from slavery, we've done enough. The goal of all of this is parity with white people in the United States. Specifically, white men would be nice, since that's the most favorable group throughout our history. And are we anywhere close to that? I would not make that argument. And keep in mind, redlining, again, keeps people out of neighborhoods. Make sure the way that we fund schools makes it so poor neighborhoods get shit schools, rich neighborhoods get good schools. If you don't pay property taxes, i.e. meaning if you don't own a home because you weren't allowed to buy a home because of redlining, your schools are shit. You kind of see how that works out. You don't pay property taxes, your school is shit. You can't buy a house because you've been cut out of because you've been cornered out of the neighborhood. And it's just a cycle. It's just like, your school never gets funded. You never own a home. That's it. Eat shit. Your kids come up. They never own a home. Your school continues to suck. On and on it goes.
effects of racism, welfare-based policies, and things of that nature became even more great. So in the 80s or so when we had our first black members of Congress, which were indeed Republicans, I think that was a great
Republicans are liberal back then.
start for things. But obviously we had terrible things that happened, like the Tulsa.
Also keep in mind, a couple black congressmen versus the wealth attainment of black people broadly in the United States. Yeah, I don't really care. The same way I don't care that Clarence Thomas is black and on the Supreme Court. That doesn't mean that black people in the United States are doing better. No black person's life is made richer or made more valuable because Clarence Thomas is on the Supreme Court, taking a bunch of donations and bribes from billionaires, by the way.
Tulsa massacre, among black people being chased out of their homes by the KKK.
Sure.
All funded by the Democrat Party, all supported by the Democrat
Okay,
Party.
well, I mean,
Also funded, no evidence. Supported, yes, because they were the conservative party.
I need to stop you there. Can you attribute not to the party but to the ideology? Because I think when you think, regardless of
Nope, he can't do it.
whatever
He
the
can't
party
do it.
switch was,
Because he needs to
traditionally
constantly
conservative values
conflate and
did
switch
not
those
like.
so that people
That's
can't
more aligned
don't know
with,
what who
you know,
like people always you always need to keep it so that the Rubik's Cube is spinning, so at any point you can line up like a blue line and be like, nope, it's this, then keep going up, nope, now it's this. Like like he's not gonna do that. It's just not gonna
More
happen.
racist policies
It's
in this
very
country,
difficult
like
to
very.
compare 2020s conservatism to 1880s conservatism.
It's very much not. It's certainly different, but it's also not the same because they know that they can't get away with open racism. So they have to say things like, again, we know this because of Nixon's chief of staff. I think it was his chief of staff. We've heard the old line. Where is it? I will go and fucking find it. Oh, I'm stupid as shit. It's Lee Atwater. Okay, sorry. Lee. All right, here we go. Can I find? Okay, maybe the interview. The fuck is this? Oh, is this? Wait, is this? This is the same thing from the article I'm looking at. 1981 legendary brutal campaign consultant Lee Atwater was working Ronald Reagan's White House. Oh, this was in the 80s. Shit, I thought this was for Nixon. That's what I was thinking. Fucking Agnew. Okay.
Psychologist, which I'm not.
All right. We gotta turn it down because it's very loud.
Here's how I would approach that issue as a statistician or a political scientist, or no, as a psychologist, which I'm not, is how abstract you handle the race thing. In other words, you start out, and now y'all aren't quoting me on this. You start out in 1954 by saying nigger, nigger, nigger. By 1968, you can't say nigger. That hurts you, backfires. So you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. And you're getting so abstract now. You're talking about cutting taxes, and all of these things you're talking about are totally economic things. And the byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than whites. And
Yep, there it is. So, like, this has been the strategy of the Republican Party since the 1980s and Reagan's revolution. And this kid, and again, I mean, he makes probably a lot of money being a content creator for the right wing. Get the bag however you can. But, like, keep in mind, he's doing this dance of like, oh, well, you can't really compare the conservative party of the 1800s to the conservative party of 2023. No, actually, you can draw a pretty clear line between those. It's just because the language has just been abstracted, or what's the word, has been dog whistled a lot. Again, this is why, like, welfare queens, it's shit like that. Like, now they know they can't just say black people are the problem. They need to say, the inner city or our cities. And by that, they mean black people who predominantly live in cities. And then again, you change again, and he mentions, you change the tax code and this and that, and you add, what's the word? You add means tests onto welfare benefits, and suddenly, oh no, it seems like black people who predominantly are the ones who get welfare. It seems like we've set up incentive structures that are actually a bit harmful in certain ways. Oh, darn. Oh, look what we did. Oh, no. And again, like, Republicans are always the ones to push and fight for means testing if there's going to be any welfare benefits at all. And the reason why is, again, because they're racists.
Oh, I was loving the 1v4.
So personally, I feel like there's really only one thing that white people have a true advantage over black people with, and it's that white people are less likely to be forced into a box. It happens with black people onto other.
Yeah, actually, super true. Like there's a yeah, that's super true. Yeah. Well, also keep in mind, I want you to think about how many different archetypes when you think of white people. Think of how many different variety of like white people you can think of. Like nerdy white people, Gen X white people, millennial white people, politically motivated, like activist white people. Preppy white people, poor white people, white trash. Like there's a lot of different archetypes that we have for white people. There really isn't like, what you think when you hear the term white person is going to come down to like your experience and your perception throughout your life and interacting with white people. But I would argue that like a lot of that is like, I feel like a lot of people go like, oh yeah, like, I went to school and there were the preppy white kids and there were the nerdy white kids. There was the poor white kids. There was the slacker white kids. There was the skater white kids. There's all these kinds of white kids. But unfortunately for black people, and this comes down to political identities and the way that race informs political identities, unfortunately for black people, there aren't nearly as many archetypes. Like, I'll go ahead and write down every kind of white person and then write down every kind of black person you can think of. It's going to be a lot harder to come up with like the same level of depth of a list. Certainly those people exist. Like, do nerdy black people exist? Yes. Do preppy black people exist? Yes. But do you really have a concrete picture in your head? Not the same way, right? And a lot of that comes down to class, and a lot of that comes down to race in this country. And racist narratives.
Black people, but it especially happens with white liberals onto black conservatives, where we are told that we are supposed to think a certain way, be a certain way, and if we're not, then we're called all these names like etc. And the worst of all is bootlicker, because I hate when a white liberal tells me as a black man that I'm a bootlicker, because then I ask, whose boot am I licking? Because you're telling me as a white person that me as a black person that I'm licking your boot because I don't think in this box that you want me to frame my mentality.
Whoa. I don't think white liberals think you're licking their boots. You're licking conservative whites' boots. Let's be really clear. The boots you're licking are conservatives, which by the way generally hold an outsized amount of power in our society. The richer you are, the more likely it is you're conservative. There's a reason why, like, the Daily Wire and any of these organizations have wealthy donors to fund all of their, conservative online grift media ventures. It's because the right just has a lot more money on its side. They come from a lot more old money, I would say.
In. That to me is real racism, and that's what we need to stop allowing to happen to us, because black people are so quick now to not branch out and to have new ways of thinking, or to go into careers like agriculture and these other career paths that black people don't typically get into.
Oh, keep in mind, this guy's talking about agriculture, which I'm glad he did. Does anybody, can I show this? Let's see. So this guy's talking about how, we want to get into, let's see. We want to get into, can I find it? I don't think, they might have it. He's like, we, yes, I found it. So this guy's talking about, we want to get into, let's go back and hear him real quick.
People are so quick now to not branch out and to have new ways of my mentality in. That to me is That's whose boot am I licking? Because you're telling me as a white person that me as a black person that I'm licking your boot because I don't think in this box that you want me to frame my mentality in. That to me is real racism. And that's what we need to stop allowing to happen to us, because black people are so quick now to not branch out and to have new ways of thinking, or to go into careers like agriculture and these other career paths that black people don't typically get into. It's not because of racism stopping them from getting in there.
It's not because of racism. So I want to take a look at how old is this clip? 2-year-old clip. So keep in mind, he's talking about, conservatives aren't racist, liberals are racist. This was Steven Crowder, not 2 years ago.
Of a group,
also, hello,
unquote.
Sam Cedar up in the corner.
U.S. Commission on Civil Rights confirmed as long ago as 1965 the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Oh, yeah. I'm gonna buy a plow, man. I'm gonna plant that corn. Go get a John Deere. Barack Obama, mother. I'm the president of plowing that ass. You.
I thought the last thing they would want.
Now, maybe I'm crazy, but I don't think that Steven Crowder is much of a Democrat or a liberal. Do we see progressives, liberal types, making videos deriding black agriculture workers? You ain't seeing that from this side, baby. You seeing it from that side, my friend. That's where you're seeing that from. And keep in mind, Steven Crowder is the type of person that would absolutely take away the ability for black people to get into agriculture, as he puts it, because he just doesn't feel like they're farm owning type of people. Steven Crowder is much more comfortable with them working farms, but not owning farms. And what party is Steven Crowder? Right. The Republican Party. Right. The conservative one? But, they're not like the conservative party of the 1800s. No.
It's because we're told for so long that you have to follow this path and you have to think a certain way.
I think America is a great place for a black person. I think I'm an American. Anything that's available to you is available to me and mine.
I've personally never experienced white people having way more privileges than me. Like, I'm sure you could find.
I would really love to know these people's background, because keep in mind also, like, your class is going to have a lot of impact on that. There is a certain amount of, there is a certain amount of, I think, like, racial dynamics that you can eschew due to your class, but I don't think it's ever, I don't think that's something you're ever going to get away from. You can be as wealthy as you want. You're kind of always going to be, black. And we've heard stories of black people who are, they have well-paying jobs, they have nice cars, and they get pulled over for having nice cars because police in this country are kind of trained to be suspicious of black people with wealth. That is just, that in and of itself is if not a red flag, a yellow flag. But it's not for white people. You see a white person in a nice car, blink an eye. You see a black person, cops might go, maybe not enough to pull him over, but keep my eye out. If I see on the thing, and I've been in the car before. I've been with my dad. We roll behind a nicer car. They have a computer right there. Just do a quick, was a car of this make or model stolen recently? Okay, it wasn't. Okay, cool. They must have bought it themselves. But the fact that you have to ask means that there's a bit of a problem with the system, right?
Find certain institutions where black people are treated differently, but in general, I don't think
again the institution
I've
of
missed out on
redlining
anything because of being black. And if anything, it's given me more of a voice because
the
people
real
want to
question
hear
is
what I
if
say
they're
now because I'm black.
wealthy.
So if anything, I have more of a platform now just on the basis of being a black conservative and saying what's not popular than I would if I was just a white person who was also conservative.
That is what we call grifting.
I agree with the Supreme Court's decision to end affirmative action.
I think I'm not going to start. Someone else can start. Sorry.
I think affirmative action.
I find it. I'm not surprised, but it is interesting that Destiny, because I have an idea of what he's probably gonna say to this, which is like, we shouldn't have a system that's like is racist, even though we had systems for literally centuries that were, and this is a system that's supposed to address that direct racism. But we'll see.
Has served its purpose. I think that it was necessary for a particular time, and I think that every black person knows how to get into college. Every black, I mean, you can pull out the names, the Oprah, the President Obama. You can pull out the
Right,
head of
those are,
Time
like, single
Warner was
people.
black man, the Forbes was black man. We
Whoa,
know what
one
to do
person?
now. We don't need affirmative action anymore. And to me, affirmative action is offensive sometimes, especially nowadays, because I have 6 children, and 2 boys, 4 girls. And
Way too many kids.
all of them went to Harvard and Columbia and this one and that one. And it would.
Okay, so this lady's like, not to, you know, I'm one of 2 things. All of your kids, or she said all of them went to Harvard. First of all, you either A, have money, B, you come from the owning class, which I guess is kind of the same thing. One of those 2 things. Or C, all of your kids are just fucking brainiac, which I don't.
It breaks my heart to think that they accomplished that goal of getting into these institutions.
Oh yeah, this is
just
like
because of the color of their
mental.
skin.
Definitely
Yeah.
say that it creates a lot of.
Keep in mind also, like, this is the argument that I don't like when people make it for black people. When black people make it, I think on an individual level, you could probably say that, and there will be people who be like, I don't like the idea of my son or even me getting like a minor advantage because I'm black in college admissions. But I think it would be foolish to argue that as a society, we don't need this structure to address the overall issue in America in terms of success in America if you're black versus if you're white.
Tension when you have affirmative action. I remember my first week at the University of Illinois, I was sitting with some classmates and a white student turned to me and jokingly like, hey.
Like, okay, so I want you to think about this. This is from the Rand Corporation. This is not some liberal think tank. White Americans hold 10 times more total wealth than black Americans. They are 28 times more likely to become millionaires. Oh, Jesus. Like, other is higher than black people in this country. I don't even know what that means. But like, come on. Like the idea that, oh, we've solved it. No, maybe you solved it by, I don't know, being of a higher socioeconomic class, or again, this is all like we've solved it. No, you've figured out whatever the formula is that like got you out of it. You solved it for yourself, but that's not the same thing as solving it for society. We have millions of people that, this problem never got solved for. And like, we need to, when we talk about public policy, it needs to be geared towards that kind of thinking, and not, oh, if we can get 1,000 black people to become millionaires, then we've solved it. Which, no, that's not at all it. That's not at all it.
Xavier, like, did you just attach a smiley face when you applied for this college? And I started asking what he meant, and he said to me that he was like, you're black, I'm assuming you had decent grades. You could have just attached a smiley face and you would have gotten into the university. So
sorry, I didn't hear the beginning of the story.
I remember my first week at the University of Illinois, I was sitting with some classmates and a white student turned to me and jokingly like, hey, Xavier, like, did you just attach a smiley face when you applied for this college? And I started asking what he meant, and he said to me that
so this person is probably, maybe not like personally racist, but maybe a bit presumptive.
He was like, you're black, I'm assuming you had decent grades. You could have just attached a smiley face and you would have gotten into the university. So I was livid by that, and I went off. I started naming all my accomplishments, and I felt so confident only for about an hour. Because then an hour later, I started saying to myself, like, wow, like, did I actually earn my way in here? I started to have this insecurity, and I started wondering to myself, did I earn this position myself, or did my ancestors' suffering earn this for me?
And two,
Well, if we're being really honest here, does it matter that much? For, you know, for a lot of white people in this country, they've been set up through their ancestral heritage, right? Like a lot of white people can trace like their lineage and time in this country back pretty damn far, if not to the beginning of the country. Like, do you think they think once to themselves, like, do you think I have an advantage in that our family has been able to continually pass down land, property, and the wealth of each generation down to the next, to start out with? Like, do you think, do white people ever ask themselves that? No, because that's a question that black people, for whatever reason in this country, have to ask themselves, but like framed in a negative light. If that were true, if your ancestors who were slaves got you to this point, guess what? Have some fucking pride in that. They worked hard. You got where you are. Maybe, I don't know. I don't even know about appreciative, because it's not an appreciation thing, but it's like why are you even looking at that in a negative light? Nobody looks at that in like a negative light for themselves. Like, why is it only that's bad for black people? Why is it that, like, if you got anything out of slavery, because keep in mind, white people who owned slaves got something out of it. It was called free unlimited labor. But never once did they ask themselves, did my ancestor who owned slaves, am I still, do I benefit from their leg up in society hundreds of years later? And somehow this black man is like wondering, did the toiling on the fields that my ancestors do, get me into college? And is that a bad thing? Like, that to me is actually insane. It's an actually insane concept.
I've seen it in the sense of like affirmative action taking away from other people who are minorities. Like I had a friend who was Asian and he in high school and he really wanted to go to MIT. That was his dream school. He interned there. He was super like prepared to go there and he didn't get in. And you can only assume that it was because of affirmative action because they have such a large Asian population that they want to admit other people.
Yeah, I was going to actually argue that it's more racist nowadays because it excludes so many Asian Americans from getting into universities who do deserve a spot and they can't get in because of affirmative action, which, again, like you were saying, was necessary at the time because it.
And you can only assume that it was because of Asian and he in high school and he.
Or did my ancestors' suffering earn this for me?
And two, I've seen it in the sense of like affirmative action taking away from other people who are minorities. Like I had a friend who was Asian and he in high school and he really wanted to go to MIT. That was his dream school. He interned there. He was super like prepared to go there and he didn't get in. And you can only assume that it was because of affirmative action because they have such a large Asian population that they want to admit other people.
Okay. So again, this is another one of those things where it's like, are there not other colleges that you can go to? There, like, there are? Okay, then you'll be fine. Like, the idea of like, I'm sorry, but not everyone can go everywhere. And yeah, when we have an entire group of people, like an entire race of people in this country, an entire ethnicity of people in this country who are like held back, like looking at that chart, that other probably makes up like probably a decent amount of that is Asian folks. Like, do you think maybe this is a case where that individual should probably be like, I can probably go somewhere else and transfer in if I really want to? There are other colleges for you. I get that it sucks that like, oh, but I like really wanted to go to MIT. I get it, man. But like, at the end of the day, like, you're not going to get in because you're not going to get in. And like, you either are or you aren't. And there just isn't, especially with college admissions to private institutions, there just isn't this like, oh, I have a right to go to the college that I want to go to. It's just not a thing. I think all people have a right to education, certainly. I believe in universal education. But in terms of like, oh, I want to go to MIT, and this is also why I don't like the commodification of education to begin with, but like, at the end of the day, it's kind of just like, well, are you arguing that that black kid didn't want to go? Is his desire to go to MIT any worse, any less valuable, or any less valid than yours? And some people might go like, oh, but like, what if he got worse test scores? First of all, how do you know that? That's always an assumption that people bring up, that, oh, well, you know, blacks do worse on this. Like, this individual Asian person didn't get in because this individual black person got worse scores because they're black, they got in. You don't know that. And there isn't any information that you can't pull up those test scores, and you're like, what you're doing is making that assumption. You're building that in, that the black person in and of itself is, like, by definition, is worse than the Asian person in that scenario. And, like, obviously that's pretty fucking racist. But, like, it's just kind of, it's just one of those things. There are other colleges. Go to a different college. You'll be fine. Oh, I interned there. All right, cool. You got to intern there. Put that on your resume. Put that on your whatever. But, like, I'm sorry. We're not getting rid of well, we did, unfortunately, but, you know, again, this will all come down to, what is the admission rate going to be for black people going forward over the next maybe like 5 years? If we see a drop, and depending on how significant it is, we're going to know. And we're going to know the effects and how, like, Asian people, and keep in mind, this is an incredibly small group of like, this is a hyper specific example. Somebody who went to MIT, somebody who did this, did all this. Like, for that one person, that incredibly minute group of people, we eschewed a system that offered college admissions to millions of African Americans in this country.
Yeah, I was going to actually argue that it's more racist nowadays because it excludes so many Asian Americans from getting into universities who do deserve a spot, and they can't get in because of affirmative action, which, again, like you were saying, was necessary at the time. Yeah. But now it's like, anybody, if you have the skills to do it and you're in America, you can get in.
Also, keep in mind, like, let's see, where is it? What am I looking for? College admission rates by race. Can I get a chart? Can I get a chart? 1995 to, what is this? Harvard. Oh, Crimson. No, I don't want Harvard's numbers. National Center for, oh, here we go. Here we go. Cool. I want to see this. Let's take a look. Let's see. Total 2010, 2019. Like, figure 2. College enrollment rates of 18 to 24-year-olds by race, ethnicity, 2010. Black people down here at 38, 37. Asian, 64, 62. I mean, like, college enrollment rates. Okay, this is good. Well, I don't, wait, college. These are college enrollment rates. Sorry. Let's see. College enrollment rates by sex, race, and ethnicity. Oh, we have a female. Let's see. Overall, female's actually a bit higher. Let's see. Oh, is this it? Is this okay? Love. Oh goodness, what just happened? Oh, did I accidentally print? No, get out of this. Or did I hit the thing? Yeah, no, go back to this. Thank you. College enrollment rates 18 to 24 by level institution. Fuck is this? Percent includes overall college enrollment rate in 2019 was not measurable different from the rate of 2010, 41%. However, the overall consistency mass divergent trends. Overall, okay, let's see. Overall college enrollment rates from 18 to 24 was 41% in 2019. College enrollment rate in 2019 was higher for 18 to 24-year-olds who were Asian, 62%. For those who were of 2 or more races, white, black, Hispanic, and American Indian, Alaska Native. So, like, maybe it's just me, but I'm like, it seems like Asians are having a perfectly fine time getting into college. Doesn't really seem like we have a problem with their enrollment.
I think affirmative action is the worst thing, considering all the different types or aspects of a background you might take into account when somebody's getting into college, whether they were in certain clubs, you know, Boy Scouts, what type of classes they took. That might not be available to everybody. I don't think that factoring in the affirmative action is necessarily a bad thing, but I feel like because of everything you guys have said, the optics behind it are so horrible today that even if it is slightly beneficial in the long run for.
Oh yeah, okay. So is Destiny doing the it's optically like bad? Okay, that's fair.
Certain people, I think we can probably refocus most of that into figuring out like the class that people come from, the neighborhoods, the backgrounds, or whatever, without it having to necessarily target race.
I'm gonna say you could easily just target zip codes.
Is instead of a black person being in school thinking like, man, am I here because I'm an affirmative action pick? Is it going to be a kid that is poor or a kid that's from a different zip code?
I think we should do away with all of it. Just like submit an application, no demographics. Why do they ask your sexuality? Like, why do they ask all that stuff?
Okay, so I actually don't really mind them doing like kind of during that. I actually don't really mind that. But again, this is also like, this also comes down to the fact that our colleges aren't public institutions the same way that, like, you know, when your kid goes to high school, you don't submit like a questionnaire or an application. They just go to the high school that your taxes go to fund. And I think it should be the same way for colleges. Sure, we can have private colleges. I'm perfectly fine with having, you know, if you want to have a private college out there, you know, your Harvards or whatever, they can still exist. But everybody, I think, should have an opportunity to go to college the same way that everyone has an opportunity to go to high school and elementary school. That, you know, and through that, I think you'd see, first of all, you'd drive down the price of college, but also, you know, you'd see a lot more. You'd really get rid of a lot of these problems in terms of like college admissions and the discriminatory process.
So, if affirmative action accomplished its purpose, why do we still see the disparities that we do in the professional workplace? If you average white wealth and compare it to black wealth totals,
we looked at this.
White people as a whole have about 50 times greater wealth than black people as a whole per capita. So I just don't understand why you think affirmative action has accomplished its purpose. I don't see
Curious. Why do you assume that just because there is a disparity means it's because of a racial issue?
What else would it be from?
I mean,
well, wait. That's testing demographics. Specifically, wait. That's a dumb question. Because the question was centered around if you think affirmative action, a system that favors, or at the very least, a system that that spotlights black people for success, again based on their race, because that's what it's based on. If that did its job, and if you say it was valuable and isn't now, why do we see a disparity between those races? Like, we're already like, affirmative action is a racial program. Like that is what it is, at least in our version of it. So what is, like, what? I don't, okay.
Upbringing, economic abilities,
desire to
skills.
go, desire to.
I mean, zip code does play a lot. If you grow up in a neighborhood that experiences a lot of trauma, you're not as likely to do as well in school, which means you're.
Why did they grow up in a neighborhood that experiences a lot of trauma?
I mean, lots of people do.
Yes, but why specifically do more black people?
Government assistance programs.
Government assistance programs, like what?
Try redlining.
I mean, you can go into that.
What? Wait, what? Why would government assistance keep you in those neighborhoods? You're in the neighborhoods and you need, the government assistance came after. You need it to, okay.
If you'd like to, but let's take a look
relevant.
at the Great Societies Act, which was created to kick black fathers out of the home and get black mothers on welfare assistance. These things aren't beneficial for economics. These things aren't beneficial for actually paving a way for success for black children and black.
Like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. These are like empty talking points. They don't, like, it's just the same welfare. It's just Reagan welfare queens. Where are the fathers? That's all it is.
Black families. I mean, reducing a two-family household to a one-family household isn't going to make them the richest man in the world. It isn't even going to get them out of high school. Nonetheless, the ability to even get to college.
You mean two-parent?
The child, yes, but a two-parent household in comparison to a one-parent household, that child is not going to be nearly as successful. That child is more disposed to being sent into prison.
Oh yeah, keep in mind also there are millions of families made up of non-married couples who just live together. And the reason, and again, the the means testing that we have around welfare are like usually disincentivize marriage, because then the like actual standards for welfare acceptance changes, but we can change those standards and that would be it, right? Like, you just change the standards. But have Republicans been interested in changing the standards? No. They've been like, anytime a Republican gets a chance, they want to add more means testing onto the system or get rid of it altogether.
By doing crimes or not doing very well in school. So how are they even supposed to get that, that wealth disparity shrunk if they aren't even able to get out of the community that is causing these problems for them?
Something I think that this conversation illustrates is that, like, affirmative action is literally the very end of the line of a lot of different parts of a person's life. And by that point, trying to rectify all of the inequities that have existed, to try to remedy any of that at the very end with affirmative action, it might just be too broad a brush, and maybe we'd be better served focusing on the earlier issues than trying to throw a kid who maybe, can barely read at a 6th grade level into a college to hope that that's the thing that fixes the problem at the end of the line.
I think affirmative action.
Yeah, and I think overall, like, the answer to this is not affirmative action by race, but through class. That's the actual way you do this. Or you just build universal systems. That's also the other one. You just tax the wealthy and build universal systems, and you don't have to deal with any of these problems.
Wasn't really supposed to, like, send kids to Harvard that weren't prepared to go to Harvard. I think that's quite a myth, in fact. I think those that have the qualities to get to Harvard were, before affirmative action, were just completely overlooked. Clarence Thomas is like the perfect example. Regardless of what you think about him, he was able to get to Harvard because of affirmative action, because it focused on finding people that were, again, like, just overlooked for those.
But things
And keep in mind also, especially when we're talking about Harvard, because this is the thing, they always want to, like, center the conversation around Harvard admissions, around Yale admissions, around these, like, really high level institutions where the shades of differences between students is pretty thin. There really isn't like when two people apply to Harvard, there isn't this huge disparity. Most of the time, they've been working towards that application throughout their high school career. And what affirmative action did for a lot of black people is give them that just little, that one element that normally, historically, was the deciding factor to keep them out. Or more or less, not so much their racial component, but if you're black, you probably grew up in neighborhoods that weren't great, didn't have as good of education systems. So if as a black person, you're coming from, I don't know, you're coming out of some, downtrodden black neighborhood in Michigan, let's say, in Detroit, let's say, you are going to have to work so much harder to get a score within batting range of somebody who comes out of a private institution with SAT prep and a lot of other resources. And what affirmative action did for those people, for those black people, Clarence Thomas being one of them, was fill that gap a little bit with their background. Now, again, that's, destiny is right that the optics might be too far gone at this point. But that's the system, and that's the benefit that we got from it. Going forward, the question is going to be, with that benefit gone, how many black people are going to be looked over through college admissions because that one element isn't there to give them that little, okay. Because when we just look at scores, right? You hand me a prep school student who gets a 98 out of 100. You hand me some kid from the hood, he gets 96 out of 100. They're going to take the 98. But if they knew that the person coming from the hood, if they knew that they got all the way to a 96, they might pick the 96 because they'll go, shit. For them to get a 96, they had to go through way more than what this person did to get to 98. And that's the overall thing. And again, if everyone had access to education, we wouldn't have this problem. But in the system that we have, this is what we have to work with. And again, now that it's gone, we'll see what black college admissions is like.
It ended up changing. It morphed into something else. So what started out as a good program of giving all black people or people with a lesser chance or lesser opportunity, it started out as that, and then it morphed and I'm not sure who morphed it, but it morphed into, okay, so now we have to have one black, one Hispanic, one this, one that.
That's not how that works.
But hey, talk to the corporations, talk to the people who hire, talk to the board members who say we need to have a woman on the board, we need to have a black on the board.
Cool. Wait. Tell me how it's better for them to not do that. No, really, because the idea of diversity being like a net negative is ridiculous. And it's this idea of like, look, we don't need all of these different races to come to our institutions. We don't need women to be a part of the business class. And guess what the result of that's going to be? You're not going to have women in the business class. You're just not. Should we gatekeep it or should we not? And you can say, oh, you know, they just do it. And they're like, all right, do we have a woman? Do we have a brown person? Do we have a this? Which, yeah, like they go about it in an awkward and kind of stupid way. But at the end of the day, those are still people who need jobs and otherwise aren't, like, if they don't get them, where do they end up? Like, where do they go? Just what? No women ever get hired? Again, you take away this sort of stuff and you're just going to let, you know, silent biases run a lot of this. And unfortunately, we don't live in a world where, you know, we don't live in an egalitarian society where, you know, people are rather free and rather equal. We're going to end up living in a much more, you know, homogenous and quite frankly run by a white guy looking ass world. Because that's still predominantly. We're talking about you need to put one lady on the board. Wow. What a fucking sacrifice. And yet and yet these conservatives are like, oh, but like, should we even have that? And it's like, well, it's not asking for much. Be nice if you included non-white guys into the circle of power just a little bit. Be nice if people who weren't white and male got to be executives. That'd be cool, I think.
We need to have a Latina, a Latinx, whatever on the board. So it morphed from helping us into now
tokenization.
Yes. So you have to have one of this, one of that.
Well, when you start with a country where people only hire you if you're white, that's necessary. And I know that you said that it started good and then ended whatever. And I don't think that affirmative action was perfect by any measure, but we still see really, really bad inequalities. So if you're going to
yeah, like again, we have to contend with, you always have to remember that like black people were property until the 1880s, right? Whenever the Civil War ended. I always forget what the exact date is. But like black people were property for hundreds of years. Then they were second-class citizens. There are black people alive in this country who did not have equal rights to white people who are still alive. We didn't solve a 400 plus year problem in 60 years. We just didn't do it. And anyone telling you that we did knows that they made it. And that they don't need it anymore. And they're worried that it'll hold somebody in their class back. Because now they're in that class. And now they're the ones who might get passed over. Their kids might get passed over for the next person in line. It's kicking the ladder down.
Get rid of affirmative action. What's the replacement?
Meritocracy.
There's no meritocracy in this country. You look at Elon Musk. He's destroying Twitter. There's no meritocracy. That's ridiculous.
Well, first thing I want to bounce back to is
it's
not a myth that there.
And again, you'll again, I'll say it every single time. The only people who believe in the meritocracy are those at the top. Because when you're at the top, you have to believe that, you have to believe you did it, right? Right? Like, you did the thing, you worked hard, right? It couldn't have been that you just got lucky. No, it's because I worked hard, because I did, right? And that's always the thing with that sort of stuff. It's always like, I worked hard. Yeah. I worked hard, and that's why I'm at where I'm at. Not because I was one of the few who got to make it.
There are like minorities that are being put into colleges that they're not ready for. If you look at a lot of these top universities, including Harvard, Yale, etc., you're going to see a lot of minorities on academic probation because they are being placed in universities that they are not ready for. They are not cut out for that just yet. And it even just makes sense if you look at how much they have to achieve in order to get there. Asian students on average have to score 450 points higher than a black student in order to get in the same university. So if you think of the universities,
a student who self-identifies as Asian will need 140 SAT points higher than whites, 320 SAT points higher than Hispanics, and 450 SAT points higher than African Americans. National Study of College Experience led by Epstein and Radford in 2009. That's a bit old, but dated nonetheless.
that have courses,
Just, you know what, I've said it before, just abolish private
etc., that grade on a curve, you can only have so many people with an A, so many people with a B, etc. So that means that the bottom percentile is going to fail. Who is most likely, just based on logic, going to be the ones failing? It's going to be the people who didn't have the credentials to get there in the first place. And then I have to bounce back to.
I want to get you on that point, because I would posit that the people who are least likely to have good outcomes in an academic setting are those who have to work 2 jobs, are those who have to drive there from home because they can't afford a dorm.
God damn. I like homeboy here. He's coming correct.
Are those who have to go into crippling financial debt. These are and have other stresses in their life. They can't afford a doctor. They can't afford a dentist. They can't afford anything.
I had to do
so
that too, though.
Those are the
That's
people.
not just black people. It's not just.
But it's
If we're looking at
overwhelmingly.
straight numbers, there are more.
Well, whoa. Whoa. I don't want to hear the like, well, I had to do that. Yeah, I know. I'm not talking about you. This is averages. We're talking about an entire population set. Jesus.
More white people in poverty than black people.
If you look at the raw numbers, but if you
I don't
actually
know, what are the
understand
wrong
what you're talking
numbers?
about.
No
The
number
issue
is
is poverty
wrong.
in general, though. I don't think it's like who's in poverty. It's like poverty sucks.
Maybe we should.
Well, yeah, you're right. Poverty is the problem. Do you want to know who predominantly resides within poverty? Okay, then.
Make college free, and maybe we want to have affirmative action wouldn't be
The
that
true
necessary.
answer. The true
More
answer.
ghetto.
If you have a program that says if you are under a certain income level, this is how we'll help you, that will overwhelmingly help black people at a far greater percentage than it will help white people.
Trump supports Black lives.
Jesus. I mean, you got to do it. You got to do it. Especially the kid. He's a content creator. He's got to do it.
I think that President Trump supports all lives. I think that he looks at all American citizens as equal. I don't see him doing anything that would make you feel like he does not support Black lives. That's, of course, going to lead into the conversation of Black Lives Matter, which was a movement and an organization with so much corruption. Donald Trump not.
Keep in mind the movement and the organization incredibly different. The actual movement supported by hundreds of millions of people. The organization funded and run by, what, a couple hundred, maybe not even that. Keep in mind, every time people try to tie Black Lives Matter as a movement to Black Lives Matter, the organization, it's mainly because the organization is, like many organizations, made up of people who need to pay bills, people who would like to not be poor, people who, at the end of the day, are going to do what's in their favor to a degree, I think. And not to say that, like, all, like, profitable or charitable organizations or anything like that are, like, bad or anything, but like to paint an entire movement of hundreds of millions of people with the brush that you with the same like brush that you would the organization led by like people who just ended up being greedy and you know, people who were willing to take money and spend it on themselves, and everything else that they did that's wrong is ridiculous. That's it's just kind of ridiculous.
Supporting that organization doesn't mean that he doesn't support Black lives. It just means that he doesn't support the fraudulent organization that's stealing so much money from so many people to do absolutely nothing with it, nor does he support a destructive movement that is destroying cities, communities, lives, etc. So I don't see why someone would think that President Trump doesn't support Black lives.
I've heard him say he knows all the best Black people. He has all the best Black friends. I do support Black people all the time. So sorry, that was a very bad impression, but I don't think Donald Trump wants bad things to happen to Black people. So in that respect, I think he does support Black lives. But the other side of that is he's not really doing anything. He didn't do anything as president, certainly, to uplift Black people.
The economy affects Black people.
Yeah, I certainly disagree with that point. One of the biggest things I
What did he do for the
supported
economy?
personally. Well, yeah, we'll get into that one later. One of the biggest things he did is he secured.
We'll get into that. Why are all conservatives like this? Why are they all such little Poindexters? I don't understand it.
Permanent funding for HBCUs, one of the largest increases we ever saw for HBCUs, personally done by his administration, among many other things. The First Step Act, which, you know, there's a lot of debate about whether it was really the best thing to do, but that was definitely a kiss of love to the black race. Freeing Alice Johnson for menial drug crimes she committed in the past that had her locked up. She did not get to see her family for years.
Yeah, but that's not like, okay, I did say I agree, but I agree in the sense that Donald Trump doesn't literally want bad things to happen to Black people, like I think a lot of conservatives do. So I think that he just says the most yeah, I do think that. I think he says the things that will get him elected. So I don't think that he has any personal grudges against most people. He just says the most popular thing. So I think like Ron DeSantis would be, be somebody that I think actually wants Black people to be hurt. So by that standard, yeah, Donald Trump supports Black lives by leaps and bounds.
You think Donald Trump says the most popular thing?
Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
Then why do so many people hate him?
He got elected as president.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
He didn't win the popular vote. Neither time.
That's a liberal talking point.
To say.
That's a liberal talking
I'm
point.
helping you here. I'm trying to see the logic in this. Obviously, he says things to be elected. He is a politician.
So I was curious about his thing about academic probation. The only thing I can find that's kind of similar is a study in California community colleges from 2011 to 2016, showing 41% of Black students were placed on probation versus 24% of students, which isn't the thing he said, because if I remember correctly, he said like specifically at Harvard and Yale and other high like elite institutions. But
similarly to how Joe Biden did, except Joe Biden actually has a history of racism.
If he said things that people didn't like, he wouldn't have been our president.
So you like everything that Donald Trump says? You think everything he says is popular?
I love a lot of the things he says. I think he's hilarious. When he said big water, that was one of my favorite quotes. Big water.
Water, big water, ocean water.
It's a good one. It's a banger.
He has the funniest one-liners, so I love a lot of the things he says. As far as policy, he sucks, but...
I'm just shocked you're wearing a Hunter Biden hat. He likes a different kind of one line.
Oh, I know, conservatives love talking about his...
No, Coke. It's different. Coke, not...
Teaching Cornell University. Okay, let's see. Despite so much media spin, the issue is not whether Blacks in general should be admitted to higher ranked or lower ranked institutions. The issue is whether a given Black student with given academic qualifications should be admitted to a college or university where he would not be admitted if he were white. Much empirical research over the years have confirmed Justice Scalia's concern that admitting Black students to institutions for which their academic preparation is not sufficient may be making them worse off instead of better off. Became painfully aware of the problem more than 40 years ago when I was teaching at Cornell University and discovered that half of the Black students there were on some form of academic probation. Students were not stupid or uneducatable or uneducable, whatever. On the contrary, the average Black student at Cornell University scored the 75th percentile. Their academic qualifications were better than those of 3/4 of all American students who took the tests. Why they were in trouble, Cornell? Because the average Cornell student in liberal arts college at the time scored the 99th percentile. The classes taught there, including mine, moved at a speed geared to the verbal and mathematical level at the top of the top 1% of American students. Share average white students would have been wiped out at Cornell, but the average white student was unlikely to be admitted to Cornell in the first place. This was the favorite preference. So it doesn't really seem like Justice Scalia was not talking about sending blacks to substandard college universities to get an inferior education. You may in fact get a much better education at an institution that teaches at a pace. So it's a pace thing. Oh, UCLA, what's this? Instead of failing at Berkeley or UCLA, these minority students were now graduating from other campuses in the University of California system. They were graduating at a higher rate, higher grades, and now more often in challenging fields, such as, interesting. Interesting. Really, again, we already kind of solved this, or at the very least, the other guy, already kind of gave the real answer to this, which is universal college, and then you don't have to worry about any of this. And everyone just goes and gets education. And that would actually be something that would help black people and really help everybody. But you would certainly see a benefit to black folks in this country.
Trump is less of the issue and more so the people that support him, like Die Hard. They facilitate that kind of like hate, I think, for a lot of people, not just black people, but like.
I mean, this man took out like a full page in a newspaper calling for the public execution of 5 black kids. His hotels, all of his businesses have rampant history of denying black people apartments or whatever. So
I forgot about that. I should not have stepped forward.
Look, I mean, Donald Trump cares about Donald Trump, so I don't think he really cares about anyone, I guess, unless you're like super rich or whatever.
When you look at his history on racial issues, whether it's the shithole countries comment, the plethora of comments he made about Mexican people, just the comments he made about Muslims, the idea that Trump cares at all about some particular racial minority, I think is a little bit silly. I think Trump will say whatever he needs to say to rile up his base and to get elected.
I don't necessarily think those statements come from
Which unfortunately tends to be predominantly racist things.
a place of hatred. I don't think he was ever saying specifically, oh, if you pray 5 times a day towards the east or towards Mega based on wherever you are, you're a bad person. I think he was saying if you like to fly planes into towers or behead people or throw people off of buildings, maybe you're not the most virtuous person out there.
I supported Trump because...
Is that what he said, though? Like, again, this is always like the, if we just like edit the actual words he says and reinterpret them, then he's saying this other thing that's totally reasonable. Like, is that what he said, though? No.
He made the economy good, and so the economy then impacted black people, white
what
people,
Latino people. He made the economy
everybody.
good.
But Trump, he didn't think specifically, I don't think, about black people. He thought about himself, and he thought about how can I make America great for me, and making and I thought.
Let me be clear. I'm convinced this woman is an owner and probably rich.
You know what? I'm gonna go with this guy, and the reason I'm gonna go with this guy is because if he can make America great and he can make that it rise for everybody, I'm gonna benefit from that. So that's why I went, and that's why I voted for him. That's why I supported him.
How does that?
Yeah, it's like how like million plus people rose to the heavens after they died of COVID.
Specifically benefit black people. Again, he's a businessman, but he's also a racist businessman, like well documented. So like
and Biden's not. Biden's not.
Well, first of all, that's not the question. And second of all, like, what does that have to do with anything? Like, that's like someone saying like, oh, they don't like chocolate cake. And then somebody goes like, well, this other person doesn't. It's like, well, we're not analyzing we're talking about this person. Why that's not on the topic at the moment.
Yes, he is. He created the crime bill. So that's regardless of the point.
Address the Central Park 5. That's what you brought up, right? How do you feel about that?
Well,
he took that full
actually,
page out
okay,
after they were
so I haven't.
He wanted them to be killed, executed, just because they were black.
That story.
And he bars people from attending his businesses or like renting apartments from all his like stupid Trump towers. I
think Trump at that point was, like many people in this room, particularly liberals, a victim of the media. I think he.
I just can't, man. I just can't with this kid. He makes me want to hit my head on the desk. Like, he's just so, everything always needs, if you notice, it can never be somebody else's failure to analyze the world around them. If Trump does something racist, it's because of the media. It's not a failure of his. Which, like, honest to God, if you actually believed Trump cares about black people, you would say, you know what? I think that there was a time when Trump, he did take that ad out. But I think he has come to a greater understanding of black people. I think he has a greater connection with black people now. And I think that was regrettable in the past, but I think he's changed. If you actually believed what you were saying, but to do the media thing, it's just like, all right, if that's what we're doing, if we're just doing the.
I think he was ashamed of the things that he heard in the news and wanted to take action.
Why would he be
himself
scared?
As a businessman, not as a
Why
racist.
are you infantilizing him?
I don't like
Really?
also real quick because people keep bringing up this comparison to the '93 crime bill from Biden. That crime bill, this was at the height of like violent crime and the crack epidemic in the United States. The Congressional Black Caucus supported that crime bill. Everybody in the United States supported that crime bill. The idea that that crime bill was like some racist piece of legislation that Biden was just wheeling out because he hates black people, and that's somehow comparable to the Donald Trump's treatment of the Central Park Five that were already exonerated. That wasn't a victim of the media. The media said they were done. They were exonerated in court. They weren't there.
As I understand it, the prosecutor of the five, he was a black guy, and so in being a black guy, he went and he looked at all the evidence and said these guys are guilty.
Black people can also be racist against other black people.
Or just make mistakes.
So if anybody does anything you disagree with in regards to the Central Park Five, even if they themselves are a black person, they're just a self-loathing black person. They're just a racist black person.
If they disagree with me, they're
prosecutor
racist.
was doing his job.
I love this guy's answers. Perfect answers.
That's my policy. If they disagree with me, they're racist.
I like that.
I think Trump, Trump has shown a history of ignorant at best and racist at worst behavior. I didn't vote for him or Hillary because I just don't see him as a conservative.
Thank you. An actual, say what you want. The kid from earlier he just eats talking points and regurgitates them. This person I actually think believes what they say, because like the idea that you'd be like, look, I don't really think he cares, but I don't really think he's racist either. I can believe that this person believes what they're saying. The kid from earlier, I just.
Conservative hero. I don't even think he's a conservative.
Fake
personally.
conservative. I voted Trump in 2016, just so you all know. So I'm just saying.
So I need you to elaborate on if people disagree with you, they're racist, just in general.
I was just kidding.
He's just,
yeah. You never know.
Just like
one
the
of those
hat.
kind of moments.
Sorry if I triggered you. I'm sorry.
You made
No,
a
I'm not
point.
triggered. I just
You made a
need to know.
point
Okay.
a couple of minutes back where you said he just kind of says these things to rile up his base. Why does he need to do that at the expense of black people then?
He doesn't do that at the. I am a member of his base, and I'm sitting there like, oh man, this is amazing. And I don't know. You can call me self.
You're kind of racist, dude. Like, I don't know what to tell you, man. You eat conservative fucking ideology for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That, at the end of the day, this is the kid who goes like, what do you mean busing, redlining, welfare queens? What are you talking about? How can I be racist? While every night he puts on that Lee Atwater fucking audio every night of you can't say the N-word a bunch of times. You have to say things like force busing. Like
So you're saying calling for the
can call you
public
stupid.
execution of 5 black men that were exonerated to
When has
rile
he
up
done
his
that
base.
during the campaign trail? He didn't do that when he was a politician.
Well,
he did that when he
again,
was
No, he only did it in the. Okay.
It's everything.
I don't know why we're talking about
Steve
this.
said
I hate this
the comments about
specific
Muslims,
question.
the comments about Mexican immigrants. Why does he
never
need-
about Mexican immigrants, never about Muslims, about terrorists and about criminals and rapists.
Whoa. The quote is, we need a total and complete ban of all Muslims coming into the country until we figure out what's going on. That is the actual quote, which I might have memorized. I'm probably a bit off on the exact wording, but that is the quote.
These are very important delineations to make, and if you believe
I
that
think
when
you
you fed the media
understand,
about,
or
oh, it's all
I think
Mexican immigrants.
Also, Mexico's not sending their best; they're sending rapists and criminals. That's not, again, that's a direct quote.
I think it's more of you being, oh man, these poor Mexicans, they need to be supported. It's more of that savior complex. Wow,
What was
we're
the
back
rationale
again.
behind axing or trying to axe DACA? These people were registered with the federal government, they were in school, they were doing everything that they needed to do. They had no home elsewhere. They were brought into this country as minors. Like, what's the explanation for
I
that?
think
Like,
that requires more nuance. Like I mentioned before, I
already
think there were some
paid for the
people.
What's the
education.
nuance?
I think there were some people feeding him bad policy advice.
Wait. But if But if it requires nuance, then why is Trump not engaging in any of it? Nor the Republican Party. They just like there wasn't nuance when they got rid of DACA. They just got rid of DACA. There was no nuance.
Is thinking, oh, this will be really good for your base, and he's doing a lot as a president.
that's okay. That's okay if we feel that way. But
So,
at the end of the-
if I take responsibility for something, if I say he has responsibility for something, well then you're right. But if I'm saying, well, maybe there are some people around him advising him falsely,
Dude,
it's infantilizing.
He was the president.
There's no good way.
He
to do
called
this
the
for him.
shots.
But if someone was
What are you talking about?
The only path forward to solving illegal immigration starts with amnesty for everybody here. The reality is there's some 10 to 15 million illegal immigrants here. We're not deporting them all.
With the people who are already here, that's a lot.
Yeah, you deport that. Say goodbye to this economy. GDP is fucking falling through the fucking crater of the earth.
Lot more of a messy, nuanced conversation.
And by the way, the reason why like the Republican Party and its donors don't want amnesty for everybody is because guess what? Amnesty grants citizenship. Amnesty means you're part of the system officially. Amnesty means, baby, you got to get the minimum wage. You put that all together, you got to stew. Like, you got to be cooking then. And those companies are going to have to pay you a lot more. So there's a reason why. There's a reason why that party isn't interested in amnesty. It's because their donors aren't interested in it. They like illegal immigration. Any of these, any of these meat packing factories, any of the pharmaceuticals, any of your produce farmer type conglomerates, they got no problem with illegal immigration because illegal immigrants are inexpensive, wildly inexpensive. They can't unionize, they can't strike, they can't do any of this stuff.
But as far as people coming in, I do think we need stronger borders and actual vetting happening.
And I just want to say, in Ronald Reagan's day, he was given the promise.
Oh yeah,
He said, look, if you go ahead and you pass this particular bill, we'll give these people amnesty and we're done. And it didn't happen. We didn't. Illegal immigration continued.
Why is this person here? I'll be honest. Did they just put a TikTok online and got popular? It went viral or something, and now they're here. They're like a small business owner or something. I'm really wondering.
Even after Reagan already said we will give these people amnesty. So that's why we get a burr up our butt, because he had already done it.
Hopefully the devil's giving him amnesty.
True.
That's terrible.
No, that's base. Thank you.
Tasteless.
Wow.
Let me just say, we are a fuck Reagan stream. So anybody who's a fan of Reagan, just let that be known.
Ninth circle, baby.
My political beliefs have changed from the past.
Oh yeah.
I grew up in a conservative household, actually, in Ohio. And my parents were always pretty political, so I always stayed political. I was very religious as a teenager. Sometime during college and then afterwards, especially during COVID, my sister actually indoctrinated me into a more leftist position. And I overcorrected a little bit. I started becoming pretty cringy as far as sit down and let the minorities all talk, right? Don't say anything, don't speak over them, etc. They would, it was like the whole you can't speak over Candace Owens even if she's literally a Nazi kind of thing. So I stand by that. So
she's Blitler.
Yeah, I kind of leveled out.
We know this. She's Blitler.
Less cringe now.
Did you? Are you?
I cringed.
This is leveled out. Imagine if we would have been here a year ago.
I mean, maybe I am being cringe. Who cares?
So I grew up conservative, but I did have more left-leaning ideas about Black Lives Matter and critical race theory, and I was watching a lot of YouTube.
Oh no. I had opinions about Black Lives Matter and critical race theory, and then I watched YouTube. The worst place to get an understanding of giant social movements and a college level theory of looking at the world.
And, I did agree that Black people were oppressed and all of these different things, and that we were got the short end of the stick. And during 2020, when there was, everything crazy was happening, and I started organizing rallies against the mandates because I thought that they were just totally unconstitutional and un-American. And then George Floyd dies.
What's un-American about them? Like, no, really, I want an answer. Like, what's un-American about a mandate to keep people safe? Like, what you think the freedom to make other Americans sick and die? You think you have that freedom? I don't really think that's a. I don't think that's a positive freedom. I'd say that's a pretty negative freedom.
And initially I was like enraged like everybody else. And then it started to become this weird like political like agenda masquerading or behind his face. Like the face of what was actually happening started to peel off. And I was like, oh, I mean, I would counter protest BLM activists at my town square when I lived in Texas. And they were some of the most just bitter, vile, horrible people you could ever meet. Meanwhile, like the Confederate group that would protest there against.
Wait, what? Wait. I'm sorry. What was that?
Activists at my town square when I lived in Texas. And they were some of the most just bitter, vile, horrible people you could ever meet. Meanwhile, like the Confederate group that would protest there against them also. They were like the nicest people ever to me. Ironic. How do you do this? How is it that some Confederates are nice to you and you're like, man, maybe the Confederacy was right. Maybe, man, maybe the Confederacy is actually based. Oh my God. Oh man. Ma'am, I don't know if you know this, but if someone is a neo-Confederate, they believe you should be property. Understand that. However mean whatever activists you ran into, however mean they were to you, I promise you, it is not to the level of we now own your ass. Like, oh my God, I can't even fathom, man. That's like, wow, that Nazi, when I asked if he had a bottle of water and it was hot outside, he was like, of course, man, here you go. And I was, and I came back, was like, wow, man, maybe Nazis are all right. They were really nice people. Like, meanwhile, they're sig heiling down the street, demanding the extermination of the Jews and subjugation of black people. But hey, they were nice to you, I guess. Just, I don't know how people live like this. How? Ironically.
I grew up in a Democratic, not a Democratic household, but kind of apolitical, but everybody was Democrat. And then I got
sounds
a job.
about right.
And when I got a job and I saw all the taxes come out, and I started looking to the left and to the right and going, oh, my money's whittling away over here. And I said, you know what? After Reagan, I'm just going to go ahead and declare myself a Republican, and I've been a Republican ever since.
My mom is pretty.
Wow. And keep in mind, that's a lot of boomers and a lot of, I don't know if she would be a boomer. I don't know how old she is, but like that's pretty like, oh, I'm sick and tired of paying taxes. Most people who don't like paying taxes is mainly because they don't get anything out of it. Usually because they're not on assistance. They also don't understand or don't realize that, like, hey, that school that you went to, that you like got an education so that you could get a job. Because keep in mind, nobody just like comes out of the womb and gets a job anymore. You usually go to school and, you get a bit of an education before you become an employee somewhere. Yeah, all of that whole like upbringing, the whole thing where you went to school and learned that like 2 + 2 is 4 and learned that, 5 × 6 is 30, stuff like that. Like you learned all of that because you paid taxes. The taxes you're paying right now are ensuring that your kids and other people's kids are also learning that 2 + 2 is 4 and that 5 × 6 is 30. That's also the thing that's happening. But like, for some people, they just think I pay taxes and nothing happens. And it's an unawareness and an ignorance of how society actually functions.
Liberal. She married my stepdad when I was like 15, 16 in high school, and he's super conservative, like loved Trump, diehard Trump fan. And
Oh.
they had a lot of like back and forth, hearing the two sides, like people who are on such polar opposites just like argue all the time about stuff, seeing that there's a lot of similarities in both sides, like the far radical left and the far radical right, they have a lot of similarities. They just don't want to come and like see it.
I started off actually kind of similar to you. I went to a Jesuit high school. I grew up very conservative. My mom is Cuban, so ride or die Bush supporter, who is now a ride or die Trump supporter. I think the point in my life when I was the most like libertarian,
I didn't know he was Cuban.
probably the lowest point in my life financially. And I think it's because something that conservatives do really well.
Was that in the
is they make you
video?
feel like you can
I'm assuming
always
it
like
was.
succeed as long as you work hard enough. And that's something that progressives and liberals suck at. That you're a victim of systemic racism, you're black, so you're going to be discriminated against, you're a woman, so nobody's going to care about your feelings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas Republicans will tell you, listen, if you work hard, you can do whatever you want, like just as long as you're willing to put in the work. And I felt that way up to the moment where I was losing my house, where I had an ex-girlfriend that was pregnant, where I had been fired from my previous job. There was a whole bunch of horrible stuff going on in my life, and I
Yeah, like you find out what something that I notice for a lot of people who are more on the conservative side and on the Republican side is like they have this very naive and quite frankly fantastical version of the world where, like, you know, I remember always growing up, and I come from a divorced household, but like my mom would always kind of, I think she really instilled in me this thing of like the best you can do is work hard and be prepared for when life happens, because life happening is the thing that takes down so many people. And most of it is things that we as a society have decided are just going to ruin people, right? Like so much of it is just we decided like get really sick. Guess what? That's life happening to you. Say goodbye to all of your finances. Say hello to medical bankruptcy and an inability to buy a house and your credit taking a shit and a bunch of other things. We've built a lot of systems that really, I think, that fall apart when those life moments happen. And that was a choice that we've made, and it's a choice that we've continued to make. And the difference that I find in between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, and more specifically the left and the right ideologically, is that the right is willing to lie to you constantly and pretend that no, just working hard will get those will alleviate or avoid those moments for you, when it's not. Everybody who's gone through those understands that. When you finally plan out that vacation, and then what happens? Your car gets hit, or suddenly somebody gets sick, and now you don't have the funds to do that. There's a lot of times where I don't spend money on things, on just like excess stuff, just fun stuff, because every time I think about spending money on something I would enjoy, I worry that the next day my tire's going to be blown. Just last year, both windshields broken out in different ways. It's $600 worth of fixes to my car. And every time before both of them, there was a plan. I bought concert tickets. I did something that was like, all right, I saved up some money. I'm going to go do, I've been working hard. I'm going to buy some concert tickets, see a show, do something. Nope. Now my windshield's busted. Now I either have to sell the tickets, or I'm going to be super broke for like the next, couple of months, or all the savings. Maybe I saved up double what I was going to buy. And then, windshield gets destroyed by vandalism. Guess what? All of that progress wiped out. Now I don't have any savings, or now I have half of the savings I would have had. Stuff like that hits people all the time. There's that statistic, you've heard it before, where, what is it? I think 70% of Americans can't afford a $400 emergency. Those $400 dollar emergencies are what I'm talking about. The Republican Party and the right just simply pretends that those, and is willing to pretend that those things either don't happen or that they're your fault, instead of a flaw in the system. It is now a you problem not a systemic problem. And that's the biggest difference. And the problem is selling people on the systemic problem is a lot harder. You've got to zoom out a lot more. Not everybody wants to stick with you through that process, to take those steps to back up, to look at the bigger picture and go, look, this happened to you. The best thing you can do, you personally can do, is work hard and grind your teeth and make it through it. But that doesn't have to be the future going forward. It can be different later. It can be different for your kids. It can be different for your grandkids. It can be different for you next time life happens. But you have to put in the work to make that difference now. And that's where people find it difficult. Because again, people are already working incredibly hard. This is also due to the economics of like where our economy has gone and how much of the labor value has been extracted from the actual working man. It's just, there's a lot of things bearing down, and not all of them from the same direction, usually from multiple ones. And the Republican Party and the right generally, the place where I find them most lacking is an ability to speak to that outside of moral and individual problem solving.
Very, very luckily got into online content creation. And from there, as I started to make more money, I started to pay more taxes. When I get older and I look at taxes that come out of my paycheck, I care a little bit, but it was just so funny to me that back when I was making $15,000, $20,000 a year, I'm like, I gotta vote for the lower tax bracket, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm barely paying any taxes anyways. And now that I'm older, like if the government wants to take, a few, 10, 20, whatever, how many more $1,000 out.
You just said you worked hard.
I did, but I got very, very, very lucky doing so. Very lucky.
Do you think it's just luck?
It's not just luck, but the difference is that born into a wealthier family, you can make so many more mistakes in life. And when you're born poor, you get like one or two before your life is over. And that's really sad to me.
Yeah, so I used to be a liberal. I voted for Bernie Sanders in 2016, as much as I regret that now. My family was pretty left-wing. Some of the people in my family were like radically left, like would refer to white people as blue-eyed, red-headed devils, things of that nature.
That's called being racist. But you get like, it's always this weird thing where it's like, oh, black people can't be racist. Like, of course they can. Anybody can be racist.
And as I got older, I actually started being really outspoken for BLM. I was supposed to be on a reality show teaching people how to be a BLM activist. At the time, I did a deep dive
really
on
stupid.
BLM, and I started to realize all of these lies. So then I took a step back. I'm like, okay, what else am I being lied to about? And I started looking at the Democratic Party and questioning my own loyalty to being on the left.
I personally think both sides tend to be racist in different ways. I don't think the government is on the side of the people in general, and that's just me being, a radical.
When I was young, I used to jump for joy and say, oh yeah, Obama, black president, that's so amazing. He's the same color as me. But when I started to
This kid is definitely like born in like 03 or something.
do more research, one of the biggest things I was confused about is, well, why is he a Democrat? What is a Democrat? I did more research about the Democrat Party, and sure, you guys are gonna pop off about the head saying, oh, there's a party switch in the Southern strategy and all these things.
Which is true.
But yeah, it's always like, yeah, I can't even say hand wave because he didn't hand wave. He like body juggled like those like rainwater. Just was like, nope, we're just not gonna talk about the ideological switch of the parties. We're just going to ignore that fact. But yeah, I mean, you kind of, as it's just like, yep, ignore that at all costs. Because every time I talk to not every time, but talk to conservatives, they're really not interested in talking about that switch.
Which you may say is true. I don't believe it is true at all.
You're
I
wrong.
understand, you may think I'm wrong.
You are.
However, one of the biggest questions I had was, why is Obama in the same party as the people that started the KKK, the same people that voted against the Civil Rights Act, the same people that are on the news talking about how black people aren't able to
Yeah. See what I mean? And it's like, idiot, like this kid's too stupid to understand the difference between ideology and party. The parties, again, are political structures. Ideology is not tied to any party. Like, the ideology of each party is made up by the coalitions built on ideological grounds from different groups. The Republican Party is a coalition of right-wing conservative politics. The same way the Democratic Party is a coalition of generally left of center, if not just center to center left, and all the way to radical left left politics. Those are the coalitions within that party. Which, like, again, that's again, the ideological makeup was, you know, back in the time he's talking about, the KKK, stuff like that. You know, the ideological coalitions built at that time for the parties were the opposite of where they are now. You know, the Democratic Party back then was what the Republican Party is now. He can't really admit to that fact because that breaks too much of, like, the talking point, you know, like that just breaks too much. But you know, he's young, he'll learn, maybe, or he won't, who knows.
To accomplish anything.
Seems rather
need to be
stubborn.
on welfare and need to be promoted with affirmative action and things of that nature.
I also, in terms of, I guess, of my political journey, I was raised conservative, actually. And then high school became, I guess, sort of apolitical. And then throughout college, and I guess just throughout my life since then, I guess you can call me a progressive, you can call me, you know, socialist, whatever you, but I guess that's, in the area of where I fall. You said that you were a Bernie fan in 2016, and then you transitioned to being, I guess, more conservative.
How do you go from Bernie?
I don't know. To me, Bernie
to
Sanders,
conservatism?
from what he said to what you think now, what was the shift?
For me, it was socialism, because back then.
All right, we're doing it. Really, we're doing the I don't understand socialism. That's what bothered me about it. I mean, that's what it is. Let's be clear.
I was a very broke college kid, and I just had this mentality that everything should be free, and I was feeling a bit entitled, like everything should be handed.
Did you ever notice that, like, people who do, like, the I was a leftist, or I was, like, and the thing that turned me off of leftism was socialism, but, like, when they explain socialism or they describe it, it is incomprehensible. Like, it makes no sense. It's not, like, it's not grounded in anything. It's just this weird, like, where did you even hear any of, like, I just find that the only way to dislike it, like, if you claim to have once been on the left, the only way for you to really get, you know, the only way for socialism to be your bugbear is because you don't understand it. That's like the best I can. It's always like a misunderstanding, and either it's a grift or not. I don't know what this person does. If they're a content creator, I tend to believe it's a grift. If they're not, then they probably just don't have an understanding of socialism or have a bad one. And because of that, they've shifted their entire politics to the opposite pole, which means that they're inconsistent, like most people are inconsistent, and are just doing, most likely. And if they had a Marxist bone in their body, they'd be able to critique this. Most likely, this person probably changed their politics based on their class alignment.
To me, because I was black, because I was very much in that mentality. As I learned more about free markets, as I learned more about capitalism, I started to appreciate that much more. I started to appreciate small business much more, limited government, low regulations. I just started to like that much more. But I would say just more when it comes to economics, I don't agree with him.
Reparations are necessary.
When we talk about
I suspect Destiny's gonna be like, it's not doable. Sure, maybe, but it's just not doable.
reparations, I think that doing reparations in the way that a lot of people think of it, where we just give it to black people, I'm not an expert on this, but I think it would be more income-based, and that in itself, like I said earlier, would disproportionately benefit black people, because if you recognize that they are disproportionately affected by a systemic injustice, then doing it on like a class level would uplift proportionally more black people than white people or any other race.
Yeah, I think like mostly like black GIs that were left out of like the New Deal, for instance, that to be able to come back and as a white American, as a white veteran, to get a home loan and then build that generational wealth, you could not get that as a black American. So there needs to be, I think, reparations. I don't care really what form it comes from. I think free healthcare, free college, so that everyone has like an equal opportunity to.
You probably talk to like somebody like this who says free this, free that. It's why I try not to use those terms. I probably do every once in a while, But I really try to stick to terms of like universal, because they're not free kind of has a, I think, negative connotation with a lot of people, but also like when people hear free, they think either low quality or they think oh, you know, you just, you know, they see it as like, oh, you just think it's you know, we just open the door and anybody can go in and be a college student and anyone can get any you know, medical treatment, when it's not. It needs to be a universal system that's available to everybody, but obviously there are you know, ways of how to fund that and ways how to organize it that will be different.
To educate themselves, to build a better life for themselves. So it's sort of like, and I think Germany is also a perfect model to follow, you know, by issuing, first of all, a formal apology, which we haven't even done that, but also just like donating to like different funds, and, you know, just, I think a more equitable society striving for that is reparations in and of itself.
I have no problems with reparations if they had happened initially during the like slavery or the civil rights movement or any of that.
Right. Okay. Yeah. This is somebody who doesn't know what Reconstruction is. They really should have, but funnily enough, the actual U.S. government paid slave owners for the freeing of their slaves. Slave owners got money. Slaves got shit.
But to try
Or
and
former
do
slaves
that
in this
now
case.
logistically, it just doesn't really make any sense. And like, where would this money come from? Like, we're in so much debt as a nation.
Nah,
Would
that's
I
fine.
get this money? I'm biracial or triracial. Like, do mixed?
Oh yeah, keep in mind the people who are like, oh, we're in so much debt. If you gave a bunch of black people a lot of this money, do you know what it would go to? Paying down debt, like paying down debt and then spending it probably on housing, on commodities. It would actually probably juice the economy more than it would do anything else.
People get it, and like, do Irish people get reparations when they were indentured servants?
I think for reparations, if you can find specific instances of somebody being like actually deprived of something, whether specific instances of like the 40 acres and a meal promise, or whether you can find specific cases of like Chinese people building railroads or Irish people or whatever, people being deprived of things, that's okay. But otherwise, yeah, it's a logistical nightmare. There's no possible way that we'd be able to do it well.
Yeah, America's unique because we have bent over backwards for decades now, putting minorities in a position of privilege. I feel like we have done so much to give back to the community.
Imagine thinking, you know, for the last like 60 years, we've like worked really hard to make minorities kind of equal, almost just, you know, kind of to white people who've been, you know, preferenced in this country and privileged in this country for like, I don't know, a couple hundred, 100 years, basically since the founding of the country. Like, come on, guys, like, get over it. It's just, it always rings like and it always rings as this like, yeah, look, this might have been a multi-100-year problem that like bore down on multiples of generations, but we solved it in like 60 years. Come on, guys, and it's just naive to think like that.
Communities that were obviously wronged. And I agree with both of you. Like, had this happened a long time ago, I would understand it. If we had specific incidences that we could trace where people were just completely screwed over, I would respect it. But right now, I don't deserve a payment for something my great-great-great-great-grandparents went through, and I don't think that white people are.
Why not? Why not? White people in the modern day benefit from the work, labor, capital ownership of their ancestors. Why don't you benefit?
Are responsible for paying that to me either.
I know we don't want to use the word virtue signaling, but it's sort of like a bribe for a vote in a way, at least in my opinion. In states like California, where they've been
Also, I love when people do this. This kid, again, stupid. He's young, though. He'll learn. He's also unvaccinated, so that's nice, too. It probably is the most popular kid at his school, definitely, especially with the ladies. But what's it called? A big thing, like with the whole, I always notice there's always this this like thing where it's like, oh, it's like a bribe, and it's like, well, yeah, that is kind of how voting works. You do things that are in the interest of a group that you want to vote for you. You know, cutting taxes is a bribe to the rich people to get them to throw you more campaign dollars, and vote for you. But nobody really complains about that, do they? That's not a problem. That's just every day, when the Republican Party does tax cuts, we don't hear that it's a bribe. That's never a thing. Democrats should be saying it, but that's not a thing. That's just, oh yeah, they just do tax cuts.
Throwing around the idea of, oh, we want to pay out this much money to every black citizen in there in this state. It's like, oh, are you serious? Because this is kind of like a joke.
It's only a bribe when it's black people. It's never a bribe when it's rich white people.
Impose reparations now, I think it would rip America apart. I think that we're already separated
Why?
enough as it is. And
Why would it rip America apart? Is it because black people do something wrong? Or is it because racist whites would get really insecure and really uppity? Like let's be honest here. Because the whole I'd love reparations. I'd love for us to finally pay down the debt to black people in this country and for everything that they did in building it and building its culture and everything else. But white people would just get really racist about it. And, I just, black people being, getting reparations, white people feeling bad and getting more racist. I just think maybe black people being equal just isn't worth it. If it's going to upset whitey, that is kind of the argument we're going with.
now you're going to have people walking around going, you owe me money, you owe me money. I'm not paying you any money. It would just really
that's not how it
rip
happened.
us apart.
Giving somebody money doesn't mean anything if they don't know what to do with the money or how to handle the money. So
Are
if
we
the
arguing that black
primary
people don't know what to do with
issue in
money?
Black
That's kind of
culture
racist.
or with black people is generational trauma, then maybe they need more therapy than they need money.
Do you think the generational trauma comes from having a lack of generational wealth? Do you think the trauma could come from living in poverty? And that if you solve the poverty problem, you'd actually solve a lot of that trauma issue? And how are they going to get, not only that, but like what she's about to say, like, oh, why don't they, they need therapy. Cool. Do you think therapy is free? How about this? How about we give all black people reparations plus an extra stipend for therapy? How about that? Boom, I solved
honestly.
it.
Which conservatives are also against.
Well, that's kind of my argument. Like, if there is like that, like generational trauma or whatever, like I think examples of like free healthcare, they could see a therapist and not be, fall into debt. And I think the argument of like the logistical nightmares of it, I think if we want to pay for something in this country, we usually find a way to do it, especially when it comes to the military. So
we have a lot of things. We have a lot of shit that we pay.
Multi-billion-dollar
It's
jets
not
all
the
the
dollars,
time.
it's who's supposed to get them.
Not to attack progressives, but that is like the most progressive idea.
Not only that, but like military spending doesn't go anywhere. Keep in mind, like it's just money that goes out. There isn't anything that comes in. Spending any dollar you'd spend in reparations, I guarantee you would go back into the economy like that. Like I mentioned the velocity of money before, but that's like you're gonna have a lot of people who are gonna want to pay down debt, buy cars, buy houses, kind of like try to build some kind of ownership of property. Like that's what you're gonna end up getting. You're not like, but like people who I think are just a bit racist will be like, oh yeah, you get reparations and the everyone's gonna have like spinner rims on their car and grills or something. It's like, no, most black people are going to just pay the rest of their mortgages, assuming they even have mortgages, or are going to buy houses with that money, because those are the things that'll actually last a long time. Those are investments. But yeah, and like with military spending, it's just that doesn't really, like, we don't get anything out of that. Money goes out and that's kind of it. And we're always constantly increasing the budget a lot more than, like, it'd be one thing if we increased the military budget year over year based on inflation and based on like I guess like, the same way that we would do for wages, that we should be doing for wages, in my opinion, is you would base it on inflation, but it's not. It's just, they just pick a number. Usually the Pentagon gives them this is how much we need to keep to like, this would be like good. And we usually go well over that number. For what reason? No fucking reason at all. So like military spending isn't the like, Destiny's probably going to do like, I'm assuming gonna kind of be like, oh, well, military spending is not that simple, like progressives always go to this, but and like, to me, it's really just, we don't like, we we should have other priorities outside of military spending. Like the military spending is just kind of out of control. We need to rein parts of that in and divert those to processes, to systems, to programs that are going to be universal and help everybody, which will in the end like eventually go to help the economy and go to shore up some of those gaps.
In the world is like, I can see the headlines like reparations voted on in Congress to be paid in the form of free therapy for people in the hood. That just sounds like the funniest thing in the world. But
well, I also
oh,
don't
he
think
wasn't
it's
even gonna say the
come
military spend. I
directly
was
from,
surprised.
like, you know, white person to black person. Like, oh, your lineage affected his lineage.
It is though. Like in San Francisco, they were going to raise the average family, or the average household in San Francisco was expected to pay $600,000 each with the $5 million per black person proposal that they had. And I used to live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I was repulsed by that because you have so many homeless veterans on the streets, and they were going to give.
Does he think the homeless veterans are going to be paying those taxes?
Black people a home for as little as $1 just for being black. Mind you, slavery wasn't even in California. So why that was going to be.
Do you think there are people who suffered from slavery who migrated to California? Like, also, by the way, this never went anywhere. This was like a proposal that was dead in the water.
The case, like, I don't understand, but it's extremely unrealistic to think that the average family in San Francisco can afford that.
That's because Newsom wants to get reelected.
And also, the average family in San Francisco, are you kidding me? Do you know how fucking like rich those people are in San Francisco? San Francisco is a rich ass town. Like if it, like the average, like I would love to know what the average, actually, yeah, I'm kind of curious now because he said the average family. What is the average family income? The average annual household income is in San Francisco is $178,742, while the median household income sits at $126,187. Residents aged 25 to 44 each $177,000, while those between 45 and 64 at $116. What's Denver? Because Denver, we're not like. Show me those numbers. Average 111. Like yeah, San Francisco's. And how much money? Like average family paying $600,000. That's ridiculous. Pretty sure those numbers are not real numbers.
Okay, but you don't really care about home.
Why that was going with veterans on the streets, $1,000 each with the
his lineage.
It is though. Like in San Francisco, they were going to raise the average family, or the average household in San Francisco was expected to pay $600,000 each with the
$500,000. Wait a minute. 600K each. Okay, one second. Each San Francisco family income. Hit me with it. How to survive in the Bay Area with 400. Okay, let's see. Making 500,000 may not be. Let's see. Independent Institute. I wonder. They have a cart. Why do they have a cart? Let's see. San Francisco's African American Reparations Advisory Committee submitted a proposal. Wait. It's just a proposal by a committee, which would basically, okay, so yeah, what they're assessing is this is how much it would cost to solve this much of a problem. Like, yeah, you have to, yeah, like, this wasn't a real proposal then. Okay. That would pay every eligible African American adult living in the report calls for 18 other financial recommendations, including the cancellation of personal debts, annual income, blah, 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 blah. I've analyzed some parts of this proposal and estimate that its cost presented on a per household basis will be nearly $600,000 per okay. Wait, but what is that? What's the time frame over this? $600,000 per person. The average annual income is somewhere around 145. So like, how many years is that over? If that's every year, obviously that's not. Let's see. For the reasons I described below, this estimate may be too low. The obvious fiscal implications. Okay. San Francisco major component of the proposal, $5 million payment to each eligible 18 years old. Estimate there, among that there, eligibility, Yeah, so again, next largest component estimate, the cost of the committee's recommendation supplement of the 200. Okay, here we go. The next largest, wait, yeah. No, because I want to know, have accounted for calculations due to data availability issues that may make a cost estimate conservative. One is I am not able to account for African Americans who are not living in San Francisco now but lived in the past. This may expand the pool eligibility. In 1990, San Francisco was become The other factor that suggests the estimate may be conservative is that I include only those individuals whom census identifies as African American or Black as a single demographic group, not those of heritage. The next largest committees supplement over the next 250 years to bring the household income of African Americans up to the median. Wait a minute. So it's $600,000. So it's $600K per non-white household over the course of 250 years. Is that what I am to understand? So for every household, whoa. Where is it? Where the fuck? Because what is that? That's 1,000. I guess that's like 250. Yeah, like per household, right? Because it's like, wait a minute. Let me make sure I'm doing my fucking math right. God, I fucking hate math. So it said it would cost 600,000 per family over the course of 250. If they're doing a 250 year. Yeah. Let's see. The report calls for 18 other financial institutions, including cancellation of personal debts and annual income and supplements. No, debts, annual income supplements for 250 years and conversion. Okay. Analyze the nearly 250. Again, because they don't give you a. Let's see, supplemental. Next largest cost component, my estimate, is the cost of the committee's recommendation of supplemental payments over the next 250 years to bring the household. I use 7% rate to discount distribution. So it would actually cost each household, like if each household had to pay 600,000 over 250 years. By the way, that's not even really going to be a hard number. Like, it's $2,400. That'd be $2,400 a year. Like, no, wait. Yeah. Like, okay. This really doesn't seem as extreme. Like, it again, at the end of the day, this was a proposal put forth by a committee or a commission, I'm sorry. Oh, no, by a committee. By a reparations advisory committee, meaning that they pretty obviously, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Wrote up the maximalist, and then lawmakers need to be like, okay, what can we actually get past of this? Because, like, to solve the problem in X number of years, they have to do like all right, well, if you want to solve the problem in this number of years, this is the number you do. If you want to do it longer, this is the number. This is the number within this window. But yeah, okay.
A $5 million per Black person proposal that they had. And I used to live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I was repulsed by that because you have so many homeless veterans on the streets, and they were going to give Black people a home for as little as $1 just for being Black.
Cool.
Mind you, slavery wasn't
What if we just decommodified housing and gave everybody a house for $1?
even in California. So why that was going to be the case, like, I don't understand, but it's extremely unrealistic to think that the average family in San Francisco can afford that.
That's because Newsom wants to get reelected.
Okay, but you don't really care about homeless veterans, right?
That's just
you
a
don't support.
idea.
You don't know
I feel
me.
like all your arguments are ad hominem.
But you're here as
Literally
a
every
conservative.
single one ad hominem.
You're here as a conservative. So what policies do you support for homeless veterans?
There's ways to address, I mean,
Specifically.
for homeless in general.
That's a whole different conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, let's.
Mm-hmm. No, they can't. If somebody asked me, I'd just say housing first initiatives. That's really all. That's really a pretty like, what's the word? A pretty decent like set of policies.
Say that we didn't find a middle ground in there.
Yeah.
All right.
But that's a great ending note. White liberals have a savior complex.
Probably. Unfortunately, white liberals are the ones with power. So it is the case that if you want to get almost anything done, especially on the left, you do need white liberals.
Well, I gotta say, this is a shock. I never expected all four of you to just come forward and admit it, but you know what? I'm happy with these results.
I just think it's a lot of people, I guess, people, of the left, whatever, can kind of fall into that trap of thinking that, black people as a monolith need to be saved as a whole.
I have no shame about it. I have a savior complex as an older brother, and I will save you whether you like it or not. So that's just me.
Well, it's definitely not, because a lot of us are really just exhausted of being viewed as our skin color. Because when you have this mindset that you need to save black people and we're just sitting here minding our own business and living our lives the way we want to, I don't know why it is that people feel this immense pressure to be so apologetic and just always trying to cater and coddle to black people when we just want to be treated like everybody else. We're equal for a reason.
I think especially recently with a lot of riot stuff that's gone on or protest stuff that's gone on, people on the left tend to infantilize a lot of different types of protesters, and especially even talking to some of the other black content creators I do content with, when you hear a lot of progressives come out and say, well, they don't have a choice but to riot or break into this store, or, well, they're stealing,
Oh yeah, that's also cringe, by the way. But at the end of the day, like, when it comes down, we haven't actually had. It's really funny because I remember leading up to the Biden administration, they'd show like video of the George Floyd riots, or they'd show footage of unrest like that, and they'd be like, "This is Biden's America." And within Biden's administration, I don't believe we've really had too many crazy protest moments. Obviously, we had Jan 6, but like, technically that Biden wasn't even in power until the 20th. But yeah, I mean, look, when it comes to rioting during protests, it's really just what would you like to focus on and how much you want to privilege that rioting. If a building burns in a city of, in a large city, and it's burned down by, let's say 50 to 100 people, are we going to characterize a protest made up of millions of peaceful protesters with the same, are we going to characterize them similarly, or as this like group of 50 to 100 people who burned some building on the other side of town? I just don't really think it's that what's the word I'm looking for? I just don't really. You can do both. You can say, hey, that's not good, but like, those people should probably just, be arrested for arson or whatever. But like, that's not the point. I'm not concerned about that. Petty property theft or like major property theft, I'm just not really concerned with, especially during protests for civil rights. It's just not something. Property isn't something that I personally hold incredibly value. If you want like a good example of like where that would probably be most difficult, is something like the LA riots. The LA riots were really, really difficult. I would say would be an example where it's really, really difficult to like make this distinction, because while like the LA riots, absolutely there were peaceful protesting elements. Where'd you go? Did you want to go? Okay. A pretty, like, I don't know the numbers, but it'd be pretty hard to not characterize that as we do as a riot. But I think the George Floyd ones especially were, again, overwhelmingly peaceful with pockets of of rioting, which if everybody is outside, if everybody like, if we played Your House is Lava for, for 24 hours all over the country, you can almost bet you'd see some of the same thing. You'd see a lot of people just being outside and some people acting up outside, because there's kind of always going to get like that whenever there's some kind of large societal breakdown.
These electronics or shoes for good reasons, you just don't realize it. I think a lot of people kind of look both ways, and it's a little bit weird that there's such a complex on the left to excuse like every single possible negative behavior from somebody, as long as they're a skin color that you're kind of in charge of protecting.
Also, again, I just want to say, like, when it comes to rioting, rioting is the language of the unheard at the end of the day. There certainly are people who use that as an opportunity to just break in and steal shit, but those people aren't really part of any of this. They're just opportunistically grabbing what they can. And if we didn't have so much resource scarcity, if income inequality wasn't, I think, as bad as it is now, I don't think you'd see as much of the retail theft that you see during some of these riots. There are reasons why this stuff is happening. It doesn't mean that they're justified. It just means that we have problems in society. We have issues with the way that we've organized things. And like, blaming rioters, while like cool for the moment, we need to have a broader discussion as to why someone is okay with taking the risk of running into a Target, grabbing a TV, and running the hell out of there. Like, we need to have a discussion as to why people are in that position. Not it, like, we already know that that's not good, but like, why is it happening?
I find that very offensive.
Yeah.
I find it
really
extremely, it upsets me to hear that, because we're just
God,
like
you
just
can't,
have a different
you
skin
can't,
color.
you
And
can't
to hear
convince me that
you have to
to
help
convince
me
you couldn't convince
is
her she's not a
offensive to me.
property owner.
I can do it on my own.
Well, we have
It's
to
not some
break
small
down
business
sometimes
owner.
why these riots happen. You know, MLK once said that riots are the voice of the unheard.
My man.
So if you are to address the problem and stop the riots, you have to address the underlying inequality that has historically been pervasive.
And you're not going to fix
You know,
you're
even
not going to
if
fix
you as
rioting for X
individual
issue.
people are doing
It'll
fine
just
and you
keep
don't want
happening.
anybody else to get in the way of that. That's cool, and I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to be the one to get in the way, but the disparities are undeniable.
So if you take pride in having like a white savior complex, what is it that you think that you're doing to save black people, and what is it that you think that you're saving black people from?
I am trying to make the world a better place through whatever means I can, and
But you're doing it on the backs of us.
I wouldn't say so.
Yeah, I actually do. I feel like you want to be a savior for, and you're using me to make yourself feel good. That's what I'm
How
hearing.
am I hurting you?
You're not letting me have my own voice. You're not letting me speak.
How? You're speaking now?
No,
You're cutting her off.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like I have to.
Yeah. Well, what's happening? I mean, you're speaking right now. You're speaking right now in this particular setting. But what you're
Oh, by the way, I mean, part of her argument is you're white and you think you get to have a say on black issues, which again, I kind of tend to think is racist. Like, I think anybody can have a perspective, an opinion, and something to say about basically any political issue. I don't think you have to be black to have positions and to take positions strongly or even not strongly on black issues. Same goes for basically anything else. I think all people have a right to speak on whatever issues. There's this weird like there is this you know, in leftist circles there is this like I think like this thing where it's like, oh well, you know, if there's a black content creator you know, who says kind of cringy stuff, you know, they know black issues better than if there's a non-black content creator who's saying the other thing, and you know, and we should really defer to the actual black. No, you defer to the person, I think, who has the actual better arguments and the actual better solutions and the generally better position. I don't think any of that really matters. People do have savior complexes. I don't really, again, I already said it earlier, if you want to get anything done in this country, you have to do it with white liberals. There is, especially, you know, on the left, there just isn't a way of getting around that. And understanding that and not being defensive around that fact, I think is healthy for people. Because like, at the end of the day, we should be able to go, look, you have opinions on black issues. I have opinions on black issues. You have just as much of a right to have them. I have just as much of a right to have them as well. This whole like, oh, well, you have opinions on black issues, but you're not black, so why should you get the da-da-da? It's like, no, no, we're not. I don't like gatekeeping the ability to have opinions, unless maybe you're like a Nazi. Then I guess I do.
You're saying is like you took it back to riots and so forth, and it makes it seem like the only way that we as black people can have a voice is by riots, and then you need to come along and you need to say, okay, poor little black child, let me help you. That's offensive to me.
This woman
and
feels
I feel like you're making yourself feel
racist.
good about trying to help us. And
I also think that, like, when we talk about damage, I think especially when it comes to a lot of the shoplifting stuff that's going on in certain cities, you get a lot of white people that live in nice suburbs saying things like shoplifting is no big deal, that's fine, and then you'll catch YouTube videos of them later on being in a Walgreens in like a shoddy neighborhood, and they're like, man, why is the deodorant behind a locked case? It's very easy to sit behind a gated community and say, oh, well, it's not a big deal, they steal because they have to. Riots are the language of the unheard. I think people haven't read the full context of that quote. When MLK was saying riots were the language of the unheard and you need to address the underlying condition, he wasn't condoning the rioting, he was just understanding it.
Obviously, there are a bunch of white people that feel they need to be a savior, but I think there's a difference between helping and saving. Like, I don't think I would need to save black people, but I would tremendously love to help and make sure everyone has like equal outcome, or not equal outcome, but at least equal opportunity, which in my opinion, I feel we do not have in this country.
Also, I feel like an element to it is like there are people who hold really strong positions, like that dude earlier with the hat, with the Hunter Biden hat. You can imagine that dude probably takes a position where he's like, look, I want to make the world a better place. And if you're, as a black person, going to be a black conservative and try to put barriers up between me and creating that better world, you can get fucked, and I'm going to continue to do what I'm doing. And like, I feel like that's one of those cases where it feels like it feels like you're telling like a black person, get the fuck out of my way, I'm going to solve the problems that you won't. It kind of feels a little bit like that, where it's like, all right, look, you're a black conservative, I don't care, get the fuck out of my way, I'm here to make the world a better place for black people, even though like I don't care if you're black, and you're like, no, that wouldn't actually help, you need to do the thing that I'm saying. And I sometimes feel like that confidence is mistaken for the complex of white saviorism. Frequently, I do feel like sometimes that gets conflated or misassigned sometimes, and that's just one of those things that I think as a as somebody, and this is coming from somebody who's, I am a Latino. I am technically from South America. I grew up in a very diverse neighborhood, but my family is white. My last name is German. I am every bit of a melting pot you can imagine. And to me, it always comes down to like, I want people who are going to make the world a better place because they have the vision in their head of what that society looks like. Because you can, when somebody has, I think like either an egalitarian or even a more libertarian worldview, and they have like a vision of where they want to go. Like, I'd rather talk to that person and have like have it out with them on like, kind of cultural issues a little bit more, because I feel like they know what they're driving towards, at least to a large degree. And all of the little like, oh, well, should I have strong opinions, or should I be so fervent about my stance on black issues even though I'm not black? I'm like, I just want you to have a good reason as to why you think this policy is better for black people. Because like if you notice her whole thing is she's like, I feel used for your good feelings, where I don't really get that sense. I get the sense that he has and this isn't universal, but like I get the sense that that guy thinks that, no, I have a vision for the world that I am trying to get out and trying to make the world a better place. And like, you're like, oh, you're white, you're dude, like, I don't care. Like, I want to make the world a better place. It's not that important. Like the whole, because I'm white and I have strong opinions on black issues. I don't know. I want people to be as consistent. And I always say all the time, everybody's so fucking inconsistent. And that is true. But like, I just want people, if they have a vision, to drive towards that. And, you know, and sometimes I think that confidence is intimidating. I do think that. I think it's intimidating. People think that it's mistake it for that savior complex that I do think exists, but I don't know. I've never thought of it as prominent as people believe, but again, that's a conversation for another time.
This is awkward. Hi, guys. So I didn't step forward just because I don't want to broad brush all white liberals as having a white savior complex. I have experienced white liberals who do have that, and they're very unpleasant people. But I don't think every single white person who's a liberal or who is an activist for BLM or any of those things necessarily has a white savior complex. I think that there's a lot of white people who genuinely think that black people are oppressed and they want to help, and that's what they're told.
What it seems like to me, when most people have savior complex, regardless of whom they're trying to save, it's like they're taking real pain and real trauma and using that as a way to push this political agenda, but also to alleviate themselves of whatever guilt that they feel unnecessarily. Like, I don't know why a white person today would feel guilty for things that happened decades ago, let alone something that happened centuries ago.
Well, that's funny. You should probably ask that for conservatives, because they're the only ones who get really upset about that. Most liberals will be like, and again, this is, most liberals don't feel guilt for slavery or any of that. They mostly feel a duty to the other people who live in their society that, hey, you know, for a long time, you guys haven't been treated equally. I would like to do my part in, you know, walking that back. You know, I would like to do my part in making society more hospitable for black people. That's how, in my experience, most liberals, I think, see that kind of you know, approach that specific like, you know, white guilt sort of thing. I think more conservatives feel the white guilt thing, and you can tell that they do because they act so absurdly prideful of their heritage. They overcompensate for that guilt that they feel.
Never seen a white person say, I personally feel guilty for slavery.
I
Maybe
promise
they're
you I
out there, but I've never heard that.
Yeah,
definitely
in
have,
second
and
grade, when
they're
they taught us
pretty
about
hilarious.
slavery, almost every kid in my classroom would spend their entire time looking at black kids in that classroom. How was I supposed to not think, wow, these people are feeling guilty for something that they have no involvement in and I have no involvement in?
Every kid in my classroom understood the context.
People hate feeling uncomfortable, and obviously you don't want to feel like the bad guy, and so I feel like it comes from a place of like, oh, well, like, let me make sure that I'm different and like I'm showing you that I want to like help you, but it comes across like I think it can land very poorly.
I'll tell you what, stop it. Stop it. Because what happens is when you put yourself as the white savior, what you do is you elevate yourself above the black person because you feel then like you have to save us. So just stop it. Just treat everybody regular and normal. Just like I would treat you regular and normal, you treat us regular and normal rather than trying to save us.
Also keep in mind, that doesn't even mean anything. Like, what does that mean, treat everyone normal? Do liberals not treat black people normal? No, they don't. Like, I don't know what that means. It's like, oh, so do you want me to stop fighting for there to be social welfare so black people can not go poor and you know, not die of like starvation in the hood? Is that what I'm doing? We shouldn't be giving grants to black farmers because you know, that would disprivilege white farmers who've always been around and never had to compete for any of those. Like, it's just it's one of those like Morgan Freeman, stop talking about race and it'll go away. Even though like to say that is you would have to believe that all of our structures weren't put in place explicitly to center the people in power who at the time were white. So it's just kind of, and even then at the time weren't white in the same conception that we have of whiteness now. Whiteness as a genre of human was not the same as it was back in 1776. There was a reason why they gave the ability to vote to landowners. There's a reason for a lot of this stuff. They built a system back then that would keep a certain class of people in power. There's a reason why women didn't get to vote from the beginning. There's a reason why they made the decision. All of these, democracy-loving, Thomas Jefferson, your George Washington, all these founders. There's a reason why they sat in a room in Philadelphia for fucking hours, debating each other, and somehow never got to the point of thinking, should we allow women, the other half of the population here, an ability to, speak their mind through voting in our system? And they somehow never got to that. Or if they did, they thought, nah, we're okay. Same thing for black people. We got all these black people here. We have all these black humans who are the property of these southern plantation owners down in the South. Should we include those people into the system of decision making in the country? No, but what we will do is we will give undue, undue representation to those in the South by counting their slaves as 3/5 of a person. That's what we'll do. They built a system that kept them in power, and that system prevailed for a long time and still does today. And that system built guardrails around that identity and, has let others in. Certainly, women eventually were allowed to vote. Black people eventually were allowed to vote everywhere in the United States freely. But it didn't start like that. And we had to fight for that. And the same way it was all white people who voted to give women's suffrage, all men who voted for women's suffrage, the same way it was all white people to vote for the abolition of slavery. These aren't saviors. And these, at the end of the day, this is, you got to make change. And there are certain people who hold power in this country, and you're not going to be able to make change without them. So better they make positive change than negative change, as far as I'm concerned.
I just got one thing I wanted to bring up earlier about taxes, because you were saying that you had your job and you were talking about how like you get the tax every time and you're like seeing your tax go up. I worked in nursing homes in 2020 COVID. The last thing that was on my mind when I watched 60 and 70-year-olds on their deathbeds suffocating to death was taxes. I was worried about health care. I didn't give a shit about taxes in that time. So when I go to work every day, that's what I see. That's what I want to fix.
I see you once again elevating yourself above the rest of us, and particularly at me.
By the way, every liberal is elevated above, every white liberal is elevated above every black conservative, because conservatism just naturally, you are below liberalism. Sorry, deal with it, conservatives, stupid, bad, detrimental to society, deal with it.
A white man elevating himself above a black person.
He called me a bootlicker.
He
called me a bootlicker.
Oh no, I triggered them all. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I'm chilling, buddy.
So what I hope comes out of this conversation is that we're all Americans, and because we're all.
Do you notice she does the id poll more than anybody else? Which, like, where she does like the how dare a white person speak over, even though earlier she's like just treat everybody equal. Do you notice that? And it's just inconsistent. Again, a lot of people are inconsistent.
all Americans, we know that America has a bunch of problems, and I think every person here wants to solve the problems, and I think everybody's bringing
not
what
everybody
they have
agrees
to the
what are
table
the problems
with their
is
ideas
the
on
actual
how
issue.
to get us to unify. This kind of stuff, right? But you got something in there. Hopefully, I mean, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that you have something in there that's redeeming about you that would bring all of Americans together. So I hope that we end on the note of
Is it universal
America.
health care? Yeah, and what does that mean? Oh, American. You mean like a vague definition of people who live in a geographical location? What does it mean to be American? Does it mean you pay your taxes, or does it mean you hate paying taxes? Does it mean that you have universal health care? Does it not mean that you have universal health care? Does it mean that black people go to college at a much lower rate than every other race in this country? Or does it not mean that? Like, what does America mean? And this is like the emptiness of conservative politics. The utter fucking emptiness of it. It's just, can we all unite around a vague identity that, we can that can always be redefined, and that we can always kick people out when we feel they're inconvenient to us. That's the shit that I don't like.
UNITY.
I would like to say we're all made in the image of God, and so we're all have our inerrant worth just because we're made in His image, and we should treat each other as fellow image bearers, not just by the color of our skin. I mean, as Martin Luther King said.
He also did not like capitalism.
I think something that's really challenging.
This is true.
I've
Destiny's
definitely
like,
been
no.
guilty in the past of throwing around the Uncle Tom word. I used to be hardcore progressive. I'm still relatively progressive. But something that I've learned as time has gone on is being a white person isolates you from a lot of the different types of racial struggles that people go through. And those struggles can take a lot of different forms. Not just, was my ancestor a slave, and not just is my culture bad, but sometimes in the way that, people grow and develop, right? Like, am I
think I know that
choosing these
font
political
that's
beliefs
actually
because they
on
mean
his
something to me,
hoodie.
or is it because I'm
It's
black
on
or my
font
parents
space.
are black? If I speak a certain way, am I betraying my race? If I am a political orientation, am I a bootlicker? And I think that it's important when you're coming from a progressive point of view to understand that even though there are conservatives that are black people, you have to treat them as individuals and not just come at it with this, like, you're black, you're a conservative, therefore here's like 6 or 7 different slurs that I can use against you, but they're approved because I happen to be on the progressive side.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, granted, that's one of those, like, don't treat people like a monolith sort of things. That's not what I wanted. But even still. The thing that they tell, like at the end of all YouTube videos where they tell you to, like, click on one of these, like, things to watch more videos. Yeah, I've been meaning to film one of those. So that's what I was doing. I was just setting it up to